IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. We are hoping that everything goes smoothly today. There's no huge breaking news in the middle of the show. Nobody's power goes out, nothing goes on. So we're hoping for a really smooth operation today because we are going to talk Notre Dame football. We're going to talk about the Gator Bowl and the importance that this game has for Notre Dame and what that means and all that it entails. And then afterwards, and I don't think it'll be too long of a show, but every time I say that, it ends up being like this marathon show. Shouldn't be too long of a show, Ryan. And then after that, we'll get into our mailbag. So if you all have questions that you want to submit, you can start submitting those now to talk about, in the questions part, we can talk about Notre Dame, talk about recruiting, talk about college football, talk about whatever you guys want to talk about in the mailbag. But during the show, we're going to talk about Notre Dame football, Ryan. And we live in an era where basically ESPN determines how everyone is supposed to feel about something. And ESPN has decided, for whatever stupid reason, when you consider that they actually host most of the bowl games on their network, has decided to continue this mantra of bowl games don't matter. And now you see that all the time from fans on Twitter and, bowl games don't matter. Yes, they do. For some teams, maybe they don't, but for most teams, they do. Does it matter from hey, we're trying to go from number 21 to number 18, and that's going to have some sort of impact on a national? No. But in a lot of ways, this is your first kind of glimpse because so many kids opt out because of the transfer portal. In a lot of ways, this is sort of your first glimpse into what kind of team you're going to have next year. And it goes into what kind of momentum, what kind of perception you're going to have in the offseason. And those are all the things that we're going to discuss about why this game is really important for Notre Dame. And one of the biggest games of the season, in my opinion, when you look at how things play out, and it's going to have an impact on the direction of Marcus Freeman's program. And it's not so much about winning and losing, although winning and losing matters. It's the process to get there. And that's what we're going to discuss today.
Well, I mean, Brian, when you really think about it, it's almost developing a new identity. I feel like we've talked a lot this season about, Notre Dame trying to find an identity early. Somewhere around mid-season after the Stanford game, you started feeling better about the identity, especially offensively, what they were trying to do. And then you're in a situation now where with potential opt-outs, like you said, with some kids transferring, with the roster looking different over the next couple weeks, I mean, this is like an extra spring practice basically at this point, right? Like you get a new series of practice to really start to understand what your roster is now, what you are at this moment, and what you are going to be moving forward. So I think it's an identity building thing, and it's almost like a early understanding of what this team has, what this team could be. It's really exciting for me, honestly, because I feel like, again, I've been trying to understand throughout the process of the season, what exactly does Coach Freeman want this team to look like? He told us what it was, but early on, you didn't feel that it was getting acclimated the best as far as actualizing the plan. Start feeling better about it during the stretch of the season. But now that the roster looks different, there's going to be a new development of identity. Do they stick to exactly, or not exactly, because you can't be exactly with the same players, but to the identity, to the brand that you're building? Or do you change a few things because maybe there were some players that wouldn't let you be your full scope of vision? So I think the development of vision this offseason and right now, leading up into this bowl game against South Carolina, I think that's the most exciting part for me, Brian, is that we get to see a developed identity of what this team wants to be moving forward. And I think that's really cool to think about.
That's the big thing about this, Ryan, is just the makeup of the football team. But I think even before then, I want to talk big picture. Let's talk about the big picture nature of this. People may not agree with this. I believe wholeheartedly in this. And if you don't agree with it, it's fine. But I believe in this. I know Ryan believes in this.
Mm-hmm.
9-4 looks a lot different than 8-5. It just does. The perception of it is different. And especially when the 8-5 comes with back-to-back losses. So it's not just 8-5, it's how you got there. If you'd have started off 3-5 and then won, 5 straight games, okay, that would be a little bit different. If your 8-5 comes because you went 7-5 in the regular season, but won your bowl game, like we saw, what was it in 2000 and trying to think what year, 2014, when they had that collapse down the stretch and then won their bowl game. You went into the offseason with a lot more momentum than you would have if you lost, but you won the bowl game. You needed the bowl game win over LSU to get there. if you'd have lost that game, completely different mantra. Where I've argued before that the other part about this is the momentum that you build going into the season. And I think it's especially important for Notre Dame when you consider they lost their last game. Right. If Notre Dame would have beat USC, climbed up to 13 or 12 or something like that, and then Mayer opts out and Foskey opts out and all these other guys opt out and they lose to South Carolina, okay, you can kind of say, hey, look, man, we had this guy out, that guy out. We still beat top 10 USC. We still beat top 10 Clemson, all these. Then you'd have a little bit more of an excuse to make, but that's not the case now. They lost to USC. They need to win this game and get back on track. And I think it's also an opportunity for them to but continue the momentum they have on the recruiting trail for 2024. I think those are the big picture things, Ryan, that cannot be ignored. Kids are going to look at that. There's going to be kids that South Carolina is offering big scholarships to, that they're offering money to. Now, there's going to be SEC teams that they're going to say, hey, look, why would you go to Notre Dame? They could barely beat a middle-of-the-road SEC team. Right. Now, whatever the excuse is for it, that's going to be the talking point if you lose this game. So there's a lot of big picture aspects of this, to me, Ryan, that make this game very important.
Well, you said the key word for me, and that's momentum. I am a big believer at momentum. I know some people kind of scoff at it and shake their head like it's not a real thing, but if you played, if you coached, if you covered the game, just watching a football game, momentum is a real thing. And I believe in momentum in a wide scope as well, as far as from a game to game, from a season to season, an off season to season. Momentum is a real thing, folks. And I mean, Brian, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Moneyball, but the one quote that I'm sorry, I don't know, man. You never know, but
you're the guy that doesn't watch movies, man. Come on.
I watch movies. I just don't watch
good
movies.
Ones. Got it. Okay.
Bad movies, yeah.
Yes, because you can determine if a movie's bad before you watch it. Makes total sense.
Correct.
Anyway, yes, I've seen Moneyball.
So Brad Pitt's line is, if you lose the last game of the season, nobody gives an expletive, right? And I believe that. I do. I truly do. I think that momentum can spur into the offseason because like you're talking about and like what we're going to talk about today is that the makeup's going to look different of this team. There's going to be some younger guys that are naturally just going to have to play because there's going to be some players that are not going to be a part of the game plan or a part of the roster when they take on South Carolina. So the young players especially, momentum is an even bigger thing because let's say a Holden Stace has a couple nice catches in this game, maybe scores if Michael Mayer doesn't play. That now going into the winter workouts and into spring ball, he feels like he could be the guy at tight end, right? Like that momentum really matters. And I think anytime you win the last game of the season, it matters. So yes, the difference between 9-4, 8-5 that we've harped on a couple times in a couple different shows, but even simply winning that last game to feel great about yourselves going into the offseason, continuing that momentum, it matters. You can't really even quantify how important that is, especially for the younger guys, in my opinion.
I think another thing too, Ryan, about this momentum thing is I believe it's what you said. I agree with is for Notre Dame. I don't necessarily think like if TCU beats Michigan in the semifinals and then loses to Georgia or Ohio State in the championship game in a close game, people are going to care that. I mean, they're right. So it's unique to certain scenarios. I mean, the Cinderella team, Loyola Chicago losing to Michigan in the semifinal four didn't all of a sudden, take away how great of a run that was. But it's not true for teams like Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. For a team like Notre Dame, it does matter more, in my opinion, because the expectations are so high, especially when your season was considered a disappointment. You don't compound that disappointment with further disappointment. So I think that's the big picture aspect. Mm-hmm. Let's get practical.
Yep.
I think that, first of all, you mentioned this in your initial sort of your initial monologue, which I thought was spot on, is this is where you start creating your identity of a football team. Because let's talk about what's transpiring at Notre Dame right now.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at some of the decisions being made, there are players who are just not going to have a spot at Notre Dame anymore. And we've talked about that. There are players who have opportunities to still stay in school and get their degree from Notre Dame, but they don't have a spot on the roster because of several factors. There have been some heart-to-hearts, let's just put it that way, with certain players who do want to come back, that if you want to come back, this is what's expected of you. Because my understanding is there was a lot of things that transpired this year that Coach Freeman was not happy about when it comes to just what the locker room was like, what the interactions were like, coaching wise and player wise. We've heard players kind of allude to that at times in interviews. Michael Mayer said something that people are like, what does he mean by that? And you're like, well, if you've heard the things we heard in September, you'd understand what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of frustration about some of those type of things. Well, okay, we're going to change this. If you're not bought into the way we're doing things, that's fine. You can go somewhere else and play somewhere else. And of course, some of the kids that are going to be in the portal are injury issues and some are academic things. But there's also some kids that are going to be, I don't say processed out, because that's not what's happening, because they can stay at Notre Dame if they want. They're just not going to be on the football team anymore.
Sure.
And so, Ryan, when I look at that, I think that, you're sending a statement there that could really shake up your locker room, depending on how kids take it. And from what I understand, Marcus Freeman has been very upfront with the players and the team. Kids don't like it, but this is how we're going to do it. He's been upfront with recruits about why it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is I have no problem with it. And there has yet to be a kid that I've been told is going to be not back that I look and say, oh, wow, gee, I can't believe they're doing that to that kid, or I don't understand why that's happening with that player.
Sure.
But here's the reality. These are still the teammates of the players that will be coming back. And so you have to really come out of this, you have to really come into this period. And the first couple of practices have been like, just working with the younger guys and things like that. But you're going to get into bowl prep here, and you're going to have to sit there and say, okay, if this is what you want your culture to be, you just can't run guys off. You need to immediately dive into practices with the way that you want things to be, and it begins now. Because if you say, hey, we're going to change things, but then the bowl prep is still sort of the way it's been, the attitude is the way it's been, the things that you accept as a head coach, as an assistant coach, as a coordinator are the same, then it's not going to mean anything. If you say, for example, hey, look, this has got to change, this has got to get better, we have a level of excellence, we have a golden standards that we set here, and then you just keep trotting out the linebackers that you've been trotting out all year, and they play the way they've been playing all year, what message does that send? Right? There's a lot of things that kind of go into that to say, hey, look, you can talk the talk, but the players want to start seeing you walk the walk. Right. And there is frustration with players at various positions as to why that guy's not playing well, and I'm still sitting here, sitting the bench. I'm doing everything you're asking me to do. Why should I stay? That's going on everywhere. That's not just Notre Dame. That's going on everywhere. Bama's lost double-digit players, including 5 former top 100 recruits, including a couple pair of 5-star guys. They've lost a starter from their offensive line to the portal.
They lost 7 offensive linemen in general.
They lost 2 receivers that were young, highly ranked guys that played a decent amount this year, and 3 highly ranked guys, but 2 of them played a lot this year, Trayshawn Holden and JoJo Early. So this is happening everywhere. So if you're Marcus Freeman, you've got to really come out and say, if this is how you want your program to be, it needs to start now. You can't waste 15 opportunities to get better and to change your culture. So I think that's really, to me, at the heart, one of the biggest things as to why you need to take this bowl prep very seriously, because this is your chance to lay the foundation of who we're going to be as a program. So when you go home over the Christmas break, after the bowl game, before the second semester starts, you need to figure out, are you really bought into this thing or not? Because there's another portal opportunity coming open in January, right? And then one in the one down the road. If you don't want to be here, that's fine. We understand that, but you need to know what the expectations are, and that's got to start now. You can't wait till March and April to start that. It has to start right now.
Well, and I like that you say that it's not unique, Brian, the mass exodus of some players to a roster, because we see that every single year, right? Like you see every year there's a couple teams that lose a ton of players for X, Y, and Z. But I think that the transfer portal obviously is going to even make that more common, right? Like you're going to see a few teams this offseason, and some for very bad reasons, right? Like there's a big difference between why Notre Dame's losing a few players and why Texas A&M is losing a few players, right? That is a completely different conversation. And I think people assume that an exodus is always a bad thing, right? I think it can be a good thing for Notre Dame, like having those heart-to-hearts and trimming the fats per se. Because, I mean, I've always heard that if you're not a part of the solution, you're a part of the problem, right? And if you do not stand by what the staff wants and what the vision is moving forward, then you become a cancer. You become a part of the locker room that is not going to help everything grow around you. So I think that, to your point, if Notre Dame does this right, it can work out really well. Because I like I love the fact that Coach Freeman is being so real and so transparent to what is happening in the locker room that he doesn't like, and that's going to move forward of what is the expectations of this program. I think it's great. But to your point, you also need to back it up with action, right? You need to show that those changes are happening. You need to show that the vision is being kept as far as what the program is going. So again, I think people have seen it on the message board, seen it on Twitter. I've even seen it in the chat at times, especially yesterday during the show, we talked about it a little bit during the recruiting hour. And people assume that if Notre Dame's losing some football players to the transfer portal, that's a negative reflection of Notre Dame. And I don't agree with that. That is not necessarily true. There is addition by subtraction at times from programs. That is a real thing. So I think that it is telling to what Coach Freeman is trying to do, moving into his first, second full off season, but first off season as the full-time head coach in a season moving into an off season, right? So this is a big opportunity for him. And again, I'm excited about it, but to your point, action needs to back up words at this point. The vision is great, but if the results are not coming, then the process needs to change at some point.
I think too, this is an opportunity for you to start to evaluate some guys that maybe weren't a big part of who you maybe were this year, but who you think need to be a part of it next year. Like for me, one of my biggest concerns about this game is that I've been told that the Notre Dame staff, Al Golden, told some of the younger linebackers, like, hey, you're going to get a lot of work during the, and you're going to get an opportunity. Now, is that because you are using a semantic argument that's not really true, that they're going to get a lot of reps because the first 2, 3, 4 practices are young guy practices where they're getting a lot of reps there, but when everybody else is kind of around and you ramp things back up, they're back to being scout team or not getting any reps? Because here's the thing, if you say that and then that's how it goes, these kids aren't stupid.
Yeah.
And I think there's some first-year coaches at Notre Dame that don't quite understand that they're dealing with a different breed of young man. They're not the naive football's all that matter type of people. These are smart kids. Yep. And they have good support systems, and you can't just BS them into accepting whatever you want. And if you try that stuff and then you get to, once bowl practice ramps up, it's back to playing the same veterans or same guys that struggled during the year, you're going to lose guys. It's going to be worse than if you'd have just said, hey, man, we're just getting through this game. We got to go win this game, but don't worry, you'll get your shot in the spring. It'll be worse if you do it this way. My hope is that they're being honest with them and saying, you're going to get a shot to push and get more reps and then play them. I mean, that's got to be the thing, because right now, you know who Jack Kaiser is. You know who he is. He's a good athlete who's very short and limited in space. He just is. You don't know what Jalen Sneed is, but you know what he isn't. He isn't short and lacking length and lacking explosiveness. He is all of the things you want. It's a bowl game, right? So I'm willing to allow him to make a couple mistakes to allow him to get the experience and let me see what he can do when the bullets are live. Let me see Nolan Ziegler running down on kickoff in this game. He can afford it. Let me see Josh Burnham coming off the edge a little bit this game. Right? Let me see some of these younger players. Make Tobias Merriweather and Deion Colsey your number 1 and number 2 in this game. With all due respect to Braden Lindsey, who great kid and all that, but you need to see what those kids do, because there are some players on this team that you need to see what they have before you really dive too deep in this transfer portal and before you really kind of go into next year and give them an opportunity. The same thing when you look at like quarterback. That's part of the reason that Notre Dame was going to make the transition to Tyler Buckner, is they're going to get a transfer quarterback. They're going to get the best transfer quarterback they possibly can. But they need to know what they have in Tyler Buckner. And it's not just about the game. It's not. Well, it's just what's one game really going to matter? It's not about just one game. It's about one game and the 15 practices and the different strength conditioning sessions and the film room sessions and the meeting sessions and the walkthroughs and all the different things that go into evaluating where this young man is as a football player. And so anyone that just says, well, it's just one game, you're missing what goes into one bowl game. And that's where you can learn a lot about these guys, because this staff needs to really work hard to say, okay, do we want to allow Tobias Merriweather the chance to show he can be the guy now? Same with Deion Colsey. Do we want to show that? Do we want to wait till maybe next in Ireland next year against Navy? Do we want to wait till Ohio State in Game 4 before we find out if these guys have what it takes to go out and prepare like the dudes? Or maybe we give them a glimpse of that now and see what they can do, right? Do we allow one of the younger guards to push for playing time in this game? Do we allow the younger linebackers to play in this game? And I'm not saying you bench Jack Kaiser. I'm not saying you bench J.D. Bertrand or Maris Luafau. I'm saying is you play those other kids. You can still start the same guys, but the Series 2, I want to see Jalen Sneed, or Series 3, I want to see Jalen Sneed, right? Series 2 or 3, I want to see Prince Collie. I don't want to wait till see Prince Collie till the second half. I want to see Prince Collie Series 2. I wouldn't mind seeing Prince Collie start. I think as bad as Maris was at the end of the season, I think you need to figure something out, right? He sort of needs a wake-up call, because it's not just – look, I think Al Golden's scheme and the way he coaches clearly has played a role in the linebackers not playing to their potential. But there's a big difference between J.D. Bertrand not playing to his potential and having some misses and what we've seen from Maris Luafau, where he just looks lost at times.
Yes.
I mean, there's a difference. And one level of play, even like J.D. Bertrand when he's off is still a solid player. When he's on, he's really good.
And
with Maris, it's really down.
And JD's always in the right spot too, right, Brian? Like the things that frustrate you about JD is that he'll be in the right spot, and then just, the lack of length thing comes up, right, where he misses a tackle in space or does something like that, right? Maris Luafau, when he's off, he's not even near the play, right? Like he has read something incredibly wrong and he is chasing something that's not even there. Like that's the frustration. So, I mean, I agree with you though. It's a great opportunity. And the one interesting thing is that a lot of the players we're talking about haven't played a ton of football this year. So most of them can still keep their red shirt, even if they play a lot in this football game, right? Or just play in general in this football game. So, I mean, I agree with you, man. And I know we're not digging into the matchup with South Carolina, but South Carolina is also a team.
We will.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
Not today, but we will. Yeah.
Right. But they're a team that spreads the field out a little bit. So, I mean, to your point about the rover position for one, right? Like, wouldn't it be great to get a Jalen Sneed out there who's a little bit rangier, a little more athletic, could work against some slots, the Antoine Wellses of the world and that brand of football? I mean, I think that this is an opportunity to get some of the more athletic pieces that may be a little younger, but have been kind of eased along slowly to get an opportunity to play. And I mean, I'm not asking for Jalen Sneed to start the football game, right? But I'm asking for you to give these 15 practices a true look of, hey, Jack, Jalen's been coming along, man, and he's ready. So he's going to get an opportunity to play, and he's going to get an opportunity to compete. And if he's the best man after those 15 practices, maybe he starts, but at least he plays a lot of football. Competition is the biggest thing that these 15 practices look for me.
I think another part of this thing for me too, Ryan, is it sends a message that we're not going to be what we were under Brian Kelly, which is a seniority award, sort of like a lifetime achievement award spots instead of merit based. Right. And now when a kid played like J.D. Bertrand did last year, I'm going to give him a little bit more leeway to kind of get caught up. Sure. Other guys don't get that because JD's ceiling is higher, in my opinion. I mean, again, this is about winning and losing. This isn't about making you feel good and all. I mean, it's the tough part of the business. And here's the thing that people need to understand. The more that this portal thing becomes a real thing, the more you're going to see teams do this, and they should. And players can't complain about, wow, they gave my job away, they took my spot, when they can just leave willy-nilly whenever they want to now. And they can jump in the portal and become free agents whenever they want. Now, okay, fine. Then we're going to do what we need to do, and we're going to do the same thing. I got to make sure Jalen Sneed doesn't jump in the portal. So sorry, you know what I mean. That's the reality that the leadership of college football has created, and coaches have to respond accordingly. And so that has to be factored into it as well. But at the end of the day, it comes down to we're going to play the guys that give us the best chance to win. And I think that's also a coaching evaluation opportunity. Because I'm going to sit down, and if I'm sitting there with Tommy Reese and I'm sitting there with Al Golden and I'm the head coach, and I'm thinking, guys, you're both being paid a lot of money. I need to know that money is worth it. You don't say it quite like this, but this is what the heart of it is. If you can't get Jalen Sneed after a whole season and bowl prep ready to play in some sort of legitimate rotation spot, if you can't get Prince Collie ready to play, who's in year 2 after a full season and a bowl, I got to rethink whether or not you're the right guy for this job. Coach Reese and Coach Stuckey, if you guys can't get Tobias Merriweather and Deion Colsey after a full season and 15 bowl practices, and from what I'm told, Tobias Merriweather's been cleared. He's not in contact, but he's out there running, going through 7-on-7s and individual and all that stuff. If you can't get those guys ready to step up and be playmakers against one of the worst pass defenses at the Power 5 level, then I got to question whether or not I have the right guy for the job. You're saying that to players. You need to say that to coaches. Because that's something else. It's like, look, bro, this team's been together now for 5 months. If you can't get Tobias and Deion ready to go, you can't use Deion's missed a lot of time crap anymore. That he's been in it for 2 months now. He's been back in the rotation for 2 months now. I don't want to hear it. Okay, Tobias is cleared. He's good to go. I don't want to hear, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Love Matt Salerno's young man. Great story. But you're trying to get ready to go not only win this game, but get ready to go out and be the best team you could be next year. And you need to see how Tobias prepares. Put him in that spot and say, okay, bro, this is the shot you've been wanting. Respond to it. Let me see you prepare. Let me see you work. Let me see you do this. Deion, you wanted more playing time? Okay, cool. You're starting a W in this game. Here's what I need you to do. Bam, 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 and see if he does it. Same thing with Prince Collie. You want to play more? Cool. We're going to play you more, which means more practice reps. All right, and see how he responds. Jalen Sneed, you want to be a part of this thing? Cool. We're going to throw you out there, give you that opportunity. Here's what my expectations are. Now go out and do something with it. Do same thing with like Josh Burnham. It's another guy that I want to see that with. There's a lot of young guys you could throw in Jason Onye into this conversation, because I don't expect Jason Adamiola to play, because what I don't think a lot of fans know is Jason played with a lot of different injuries during the year, gritted through a lot and the only one that took him off the field was concussion, which you can't grind through that. You're not allowed to grind through that anymore. School gets sued. So I don't expect him to play. It hasn't been announced yet, but I don't expect him to play. It wouldn't shock me if Jason tries to talk them into letting him play, but I don't think that he should or will play. If any of you know Jason Adamiola, you'll understand what I'm talking about there. But there's opportunities here. And it's those things where if you're Marcus Freeman saying, look, I went out and recruited this phenomenal class, top 5 caliber class, built off studs on defense. And you're telling me you could only get one of those guys ready to play? Really? The other corner struggled. Okay, so Coach Mick, I need you to really work on this. You've done a great job. Now I really need you to, make Jaden Mickey a little bit of your pet project here. We need to get Jaden going. And you get Jaden Mickey some confidence going to the off. Let me rephrase. Jaden Mickey's never lacking confidence. He can give up 4 touchdown passes. He's not going to lack confidence. Give him some momentum, some confirmation that, dude, what you're doing is paying off, right? Yes, you've had some struggles. You've been put in some tough spots. You're fine now. Belief in yourself beyond just the confidence, but also because you could be the most confident guy in the world, but if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and struggling, you're either going to lose confidence in yourself or confidence in the people around you or confidence in your coach, right? Sure. So give him some affirmation of, hey, bro, keep plugging away. This is why you buy. This is why you got to do what you got to do. This is why you got to trust the way I'm teaching you to do it, and get him some momentum going into the offseason. As he then, hopefully, my hope is that he transitions to the slot nickel position. When we say that, we're saying what we think he should do. We're not relaying intel that he's going to move. We're just giving our opinion of what he should do because it just makes sense. He's the next best corner, and that's the slot that's coming open next year. He may not play it in the bowl prep, but I'd play him there in the bowl prep if it was up to me. We'll see. But the big thing is if they don't want to play him there in the bowl prep and they just want to let him finish building on what he's been doing all year, that's cool too. I think that makes sense as well. But it's about getting him ready to go play well. Get Xavier Watts ready to go out there and play well. Get the young guys ready to go out there and play well and get that momentum. Because number one, a response is going to be, well, I thought you said you needed to win this game. Yeah, exactly. Get your best players on the field finally. Get your most talented players on the field, I should say. Best doesn't always mean most talented. I'm saying get your most talented players on the field, because sometimes talent can overcome mistakes because it's talent. The problem when you play guys like Jack Kaiser, who's a really good kid, quality athlete, but limited, physically limited in some ways, is when he makes a mistake, it is amplified. It is bad. It is blown up. And he's just not quite good enough to make a mistake and recover. We've seen Benjamin Morrison this year make mistakes and recover in that play, not recover the next play, recover in that play. And that's what great players can do. Great players, like, how many times did you see Jalen Smith start to take the wrong angle at the snap, or, read his key and then the ball's going away and then just go? We saw Jeremiah Wusu do. I mean, there was tons of clips of Jeremiah Wusu. You're like, dude, what are you doing? Oh, hey, good tackle for loss.
That's why traits matter, man. I mean, even going to the NFL draft thing, like, that's why traits matter, because traits make up for mistakes. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Like, you talk about why 34-inch arms are so important for offensive tackles, is because not every rep's going to be perfect. There's going to be reps where you have to recover. That's just the point of it. And Brian, you know what else is a good point to your conversation, right? Not only do you have to assess, the coaches, if they're able to develop properly at the position, the talent that they have, but it's also kind of it's a little insight for the future recruits that aren't on campus yet, right? Like, you have a top 3 class in 2023 right now, consensus across the board. If I'm some of those kids looking at this game, I mean, this for a fact, right? Like, every recruit will talk about like Notre Dame, great academic institution, great football team, all that stuff, right? But another thing that recruits consistently say is, I believe in that coach, that he can get the best out of me and he can develop me, right? So you bet your butt that Drake Bowen's going to be watching this football game and being like, oh, wow, like, Jalen Sneed didn't play much all year, but by the end of the season, they had him playing well. They did, right? Like, you're going to bet that Christian Gray is going to watch and be like, wow, look what they did with Benjamin Morrison this year. That's fantastic, man. That could be me next, like, I could be the next guy in that pipeline. These future recruits care about the development of the classes before them, because they know that those are the guys that come in and have to work to get to a certain point, and those are the guys that are going to be developed. So I think it's a good indication of trust in the coaches that will be developing you, and that you made the proper decision. Like, that's what it seems like for me. Like, if I'm Peyton Bowen, for instance, right now, and you go into this bowl game and you're like, wow, Xavier Watts was a stud in this game, man. He barely played at the beginning of the year, but look what Chris O'Leary did with him, because he's talented. That could be me next, right? The next guy in line. So I think these recruits that aren't on campus in the 2023 class, 2024 and beyond, are going to look at these coaches and say, what can you get out of me? What can you get out of me? I trust my talent, but can you get the best out of me? And seeing some of those players rise in this bowl prep, I think would be a great opportunity to really solidify that the trust that they have in each one of their position coaches as well.
Sure. It's all a big part of it. And I think too is there's building up trust in each other as you get ready to go down the stretch. I think there's aspects of that with I would say that, Ryan, there's a lot to be said about, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. There's a lot to be said about looking at this team and saying, this team needs to unify a little bit more. Not that there was disunity. I'm not saying that. But I don't think this team had quite the bond that past teams had. I also think that at times this year, the players felt like, from what I've been told, that they were pushed a little too hard in practice to where they just didn't feel they could get their legs back. When they've had a chance to recover, I kind of feel like I get that, but I also feel like I want to see them maybe pushed at least for a week really hard in this practice, because I want to see how some of those kids respond. I think that a big part of this too is you need to find out just how tough this team can be mentally and really challenge them mentally. And I think players being told they're not coming back is a challenge for players mentally. Hey, are you gonna look at this and say, this isn't fair, these coaches don't care about us, et cetera, et cetera? Are you going to say, no, these coaches at the end of the day are going to demand excellence. And if you can't give it, you're going to be looking over your shoulder, whether that's kids not having roster spots anymore, whether it's kids having starting spots not there anymore, whether it's a incoming freshman coming in and beating you out for a job. At the end of the day, the golden standard is about a lot of things involving going about your business the right way, but playing a guy just because he's the veteran is not the right way. I mean, there were guys in the 1988 national title team that were fifth-year seniors, the Wes Pritchett's, the Frank Stams, the veteran guys, the Andy Hecks. There's also a lot of younger players that were playing in that game, that beat out veteran players. Why? Because Rocket Ismail gave them the best chance to win, because Arnold Ali gave them the best chance to win, because Todd Light as a sophomore gave them the best chance to win. That's what the great teams do. This is a merit-based, right? You got to earn what you get. It's not about seniority. It's not about who we like more. It's not even about this kid's been a great off the field. That's all great. What you do off the field, that's wonderful. It says a lot about who you are as a human being. And I love that about you. But it doesn't mean that I'm giving you bonus points when it comes to who my starter is going to be, because I need to go out and win a football game and play to the best of my ability. And I think all those things are important. So not only do you need to get a win, Ryan, but if you can get a win impressively, then you can really go into this offseason with a lot of momentum. I think all those things are very important.
I mean, because we're going to hyper focus on some of the players that aren't going to play on both sides of this thing, right? And those things are real. We had to talk about them, obviously. But from a full scope outside look, you're going to say, if Notre Dame goes into this football game and beats a SEC caliber team or SEC team that just beat Tennessee and Clemson in back-to-back weeks to end the season, it's a big step, man. It's a good point to end the season on from where you are currently, right? I mean, I personally, Brian, I know we talked about it a ton on the, when we're doing the college football playoff ranking and the bowl preview type of stuff, or the reveal. If the options that we were kind of looking at were like, okay, South Carolina, Mississippi State, I think South Carolina is a good opportunity for Notre Dame for a lot of those reasons, right? Like the overarching SEC, quality wins down the stretch, NIL team that is not afraid to put the money out for certain players that we have obviously gotten insight into as well, right? So I think that this is a nice opportunity just for the simple, like just the talking points behind the scenes. Like I don't care I do care, but it doesn't matter for me from a national perspective if Michael Mayer doesn't play, if Jaheim Bell's in the portal and all that stuff on both sides, right? At the end of the day, if Notre Dame's able to beat an SEC team that has those quality wins down the stretch and show that they're heading in the right direction and using their identity to get there, I think that's what really matters in this football game. You have an opportunity to lay the foundation, continue building, and gain the momentum going into the offseason. That's what I think is on the line for this one. And that's why I'm just overly excited, man, to see just what the final result is, because it's been an up and down season. But I think you've seen that when things are going right, I think that the potential for this group and this coaching staff are very high. It's just now about maximizing and being consistent with that approach. If they can do that, I think the future is very bright for Notre Dame. And I think that this bowl game is a big indicator of that.
Speaking of the future being bright for Notre Dame, I think we've handled kind of what's at stake here for Notre Dame. We can belabor some points if we want, but I would like to move on to something else before we get to the mailbag. Speaking of the future is bright, right before, I think it might have been right during the show or right before the show, Drake Bowen was named the Butkus Award winner for the 2023 recruiting class. Not surprised when you consider the monster season he had. And I know that he's lost a lot of recruiting momentum from the services who don't really care about evaluating the top players, if we're being honest with you. I saw rivals drop them down 5 more spots, and others, at least they still have them in the top 50, which I guess is, it is what it is. But Drake Bowen was a monster for Andrean this year. He had a phenomenal season. And, Ryan, one of the things we talked about when Notre Dame landed Bowen was, at the time, it's like he's a really talented player. He's more of a great athlete that's still learning the intricacies of the game of football. Right. I would have said he wasn't not that he wasn't natural, but you could just tell he was still kind of picking up some of the nuances of the game. And this year we saw him just explode in that regard. And on both sides of the ball, 144 tackles, 19 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles. 2 interceptions, all while being a two-way player that also rushed for 1,784 yards and 26 touchdowns, while his schedule was dominated almost entirely by schools at higher levels. Andrean did not play a lot of because they're 2A, I believe.
They are 2A.
And they played a lot of higher level schools. And so led his team to the state championship game, which they ended up losing. But just a phenomenal season for Drake Bowen. And the high school version of the Butkus Award was first handed out in 2009. The inaugural winner was, do you know, Ryan, who the first winner was, 2009? I think you do.
Jalen Smith, I would guess.
2009, brother.
Oh,
Manti.
Manti
Te'o.
I'm an idiot. Okay.
Jalen Smith also won the award in 2013, and Prince Colley won it 2 years ago. So Notre Dame has won this award 4 times. I believe Notre Dame is also still the only team is still the team with the most Butkus Award winners in the last 10 years of college as well. 10 to 11 season, because you had Manti in 2012, Jalen Smith won it in 15, and then Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah won it in 2020. So that is sort of the lineage that Drake Bowen is stepping into. And it just speaks volumes about just how good he has been this year, but that linebacker class as well, because Jaden Osbury had a phenomenal year as well. I haven't seen Preston Zinter's film, but he had great production this year. And then, of course, you have last year's linebacker class, which is still has a very, very bright future at Notre Dame. So linebacker position, Ryan, is really headed in the right direction. And I would say Notre Dame has always done well with the one guy. You know, Manti was in a class with Carlo Calabrese and Dan Fox. That's all due respect to those kids. It's a pretty big drop off, right? Jalen Smith was in a class with it was Michael Deeb and guys like that. It's kind of a big drop off. The difference is Prince Colley was the only linebacker in his class. Kahanu Kia was also in that class, but he was always going to leave for a mission pretty early in his career. Well, last year it was about depth of big-time players. This year it's about depth of big-time players. And I think that's really the difference between what we're seeing now in linebacker recruiting and what we saw in the past. They've always been able to get the one guy, that one really good player, but those guys were never surrounded by Jalen Smith's having to play next to Joe Schmidt in his career. Right. Manti's playing next to Dan Fox and guys like that. These guys are most likely, barring injuries, going to be playing next to a guy that could say, yeah, Drake Bowen was phenomenal, but Jaden Osbury is probably pretty good too. You know what I mean? Like, we could debate who's the better prospect, Jaden Osbury or Drake Bowen. And some people are going to argue for Drake Bowen, and some people are going to argue for Jaden Osbury. And so those are the things, and I've even had people mention, but don't sleep on Preston Zinter, which is a different conversation for a different day. But that's kind of the thing is last year, Jalen Snead has the highest ceiling, but maybe Josh Burnham might be a better prospect. And Nolan Ziegler was the most productive of all of them. Junior Tuihalamaka is pretty flipping good, right? So those are all things that you say, boy, that just the upgrade and the infusion of talent. Now the key is developing them and making sure that they see themselves as the future. And that they stay together, because if they stay together, this group has a chance to be special, very, very special.
It's a wild amount of talent, man. I mean, going from Prince Colley to, like you said, Nolan Ziegler and Jalen Snead and Junior Tuihalamaka, and now with Drake Bowen, Preston Zinter, and Jaden Osbury, like, you're gonna be hard pressed to find a more talented linebacker room in college football next year, just for pure talents. Now, obviously, the production at the linebacker position needs to increase, but I mean, Brian, I don't get the Drake Bowen nonsense from the recruiting rankings perspective. I can't understand it, man. I really can't, because every time I watch it, I'm just like, not only is he incredibly impressive physically, although there's some weird analysis out there that he's slow for whatever reason. I've never seen that on film. But not only does he have incredible film, he has incredible production. He keeps getting these awards. I don't get it, man. I guess it's because he's been committed to the University of Notre Dame for over a year, right? I guess that must be the conversation piece to it, but he's a tremendous football player. Jaden Osbury is leaving University Lab as their school's all-time leading tackler, only passing a guy named Dylan Moses, who was heralded as like one of the best linebacker recruits ever. No big deal, right? And then, throw in. You throw in Preston Zinter, whose brother is literally starting for the University of Michigan right now at offensive guard, is probably going to go pro after the season, right? So, yeah, the talent of the linebacker position is not hurting, man. And I have loved following Drake's process throughout, because he was obviously committed when I first started at the site. And seeing not only the caliber of player he is and all the accolades he's gotten, we also know the importance that he's had as far as keeping the class together, right? Being the glue, being a massive recruiting element, because he is from Indiana. He is a big time player. He does have a very charismatic personality. Having all those things, man, it's great to see guys like Drake Bowen continue to succeed, get those types of awards. But to your points, the linebacker position is in very good hands as long as it's developed properly over the next couple of years.
And obviously there are always things like health and things like that have to factor in. But to your point, yes, as long as these kids are developed properly, they're going to be pretty good moving forward. So congratulations to Drake Bowen. Just another honor for what is just a tremendous Notre Dame class. And he also did all that, Ryan, while gaining about 15 pounds this past offseason as well.
He looked massive this year, by the way, man. He's a big kid.
Yeah, he really did.
Before the season, I was like, oh, he needs some serious development as far as physically. And then you see him in the season, you're like, oh, nope, he's a pretty big guy now.
yeah, he needs to fill out a little bit. And then you're like, nope, my bad. My bad. Whoopsie. Sorry about that. So Drake Bowen wins the high school Butkus Award. And now we talked about he's now the fourth guy to do it. The first two that did it won the Butkus Award in college as well. The only one that hasn't is Prince Colley, who is still just a sophomore at Notre Dame. He may end up having a chance to win it down the road as well. We talked a lot about him earlier, being needed to. I mean, you need, like, I know what Coach Freeman says, like, guys don't earn playing time on Saturdays, but at some point in time, you've got to give a guy a chance to earn his spot on Saturdays, especially when the guy in front of him has struggled the way that he has. For most, you could point to a few games where, look like Maris had turned a corner late in the year, and then kind of Navy happens. And then he, plays well against Boston College, and then USC happens. It's like, you've got to give this kid a chance to go out and play. You have to. So that's where we're at. So that's going to do it for this portion of the show, Ron. We're going to have a mailbag coming up next, but I just wanted to kind of point out to people, if you have not, we've had a ton of signups on the message board the last couple of days. Over 100 signups in this past week of people signing up for the message board. And so very excited about that. We have a lot going on there. You can sign up there at boards.irishbreakdown.com. CFB Nation has a show. Bill and Bill from Sporting News were recording a show while we were doing ours as well. And, we got John Garcia has a recruiting show out today at CFB Nation where he talks about the impact of Deion Sanders at Colorado on the recruiting trail, how that could impact the recruiting trail and the transfer portal. And, of course, we're going to have a ton going on leading up to signing day, plus getting ready for bowl prep. So tons and tons going on. Our show tomorrow will be focused on the NFL draft. We are going to kind of look at all the guys that are eligible. We'll even talk about Michael Mayer. It will be a very short conversation, but we're going to talk about whether or not they should or should not go pro, or should they come back. And so we'll have that breakdown tomorrow as well. So make sure you're locked into all of this on the Irish Breakdown channel, Irish Breakdown message boards, and, of course, the Irish Breakdown podcast. Let's go to the mailbag, Ryan, and we have some questions here, and we'll get to some more. I've got a lot more. I've got a star here. We had an interesting conversation going on during the show about World War II. So I'll answer that, but I'm going to kind of get to that one later in the show so we kind of get some football stuff here discussed as well. So I want to start off with Salty Virginia Peanuts. Ryan has a question. What are the rules with players considering transfer on visits? Can they take anything like an official visit where the school pays travel costs?
Yeah, they can, Salty. In fact, the defensive tackle Braden Fisk out of Western Michigan just went on an official visit to Notre Dame last weekend. So they are allowed to take official visits. And so that is allowed. I think more often than not, though, you're going to see some officials obviously out there for some players, but there's also going to be a lot of in-home visits over the next couple weeks with a lot of coaches traveling. Like I know Braden Fisk, and I had this on an update on the site a few days ago, but Braden, the only scheduled visit he had was to Notre Dame. That was an official visit. And then he has a ton of coaches that are going to be traveling to his parents' home in Michigan City, Indiana, to just come through and present their vision and talk to them, all that good stuff. But to the question, yes, official visits are allowed for graduate transfers.
It's to the next question here. Z Andretti, can we see a whole new defense next year? I would say, Ryan, the answer to that would be depends on who's the defensive coordinator. If you're going to have Al Golden, then things probably aren't going to change a lot, although I do think a lot of tweaks are needed. If you have a new defensive coordinator, then yeah, we'll see a whole new defense. But as of right now, I anticipate Al Golden coming back. I haven't heard anything about him not being back, so no reason to dive into that conversation, Ryan. It appears that he will be back as of right now. That's what we know. And so you're going to see the same defensive structure, but I definitely believe, Ryan, that some tweaks are needed from what we saw this season.
Well, I think like we talk about structure a lot. I mean, yet to your point, right? Structure is going to be the same. It's the philosophy that I think that can change a little bit, right? What do you want to accomplish out of these looks? What are different wrinkles that you want to throw into your 4-2-5 base, to your three-man front, to your different coverage variations? I agree. I think that, and I expect this, if I'm being honest. I do expect this. I think that Marcus Freeman is the type that is going to sit down with Coach Golden, assuming that he's back, kind of like you're saying, and they'll go over, kind of a end of the season, like, hey, what worked for us? What needs to improve? Where do we need to get some different wrinkles? What do we need to do to accentuate this to an even higher level? But I mean, to Zay's question, no, I don't think that there's going to be a dramatic scheme shift, but I think there can be some philosophical shifts within the scheme. And I think there needs to be, because I think that we saw a lot of good out of the defense, but then we saw structurally there's just some things that need to be better, right? Like run game needs to be more consistent. Your philosophy going into football games, as far as the game plan, needs to be a little better. Your adjustments that you make going into second halves needs to change a little bit. Maybe you need to have a little more trust at certain positions. Yeah. Things definitely need to change, the wrinkles part of it, but I think that structurally, I agree. I think it'll stay the same.
Ron, I think you made a good point, because when I was answering my question, I'm looking at it from a standpoint of schematically. But I think there's a lot of merit to philosophically making some pretty big changes. And what I mean by philosophy is not you're going to go from a 4-2-5 to a 3-3-5. That's structural. Yep. I'm not talking about you're going to go from a team that never blitzes to blitzes all the time, or a team that blitzes all the time. I'm not talking about that kind of philosophy. I'm talking about what is your approach to just how you go about your business every day. And then also, what is your approach to what is at the heart of the system?
Right.
And Marcus Freeman, I'm very curious to hear how his conversations with Al Golden go in the offseason. There's only so much you can do during it. People that think you can just go in there and just like throw everything out and start over from scratch in the middle of the season, it just doesn't work that way.
No.
The big changes happen in the offseason.
Right.
One of the things that Marcus Freeman believed in wholeheartedly, and we saw this in his 1 year at Notre Dame, we saw it in his years at Cincinnati, and he's preached it verbally as well, is it's not about me and how smart I am as much as it's about you've got to let the players play. And I heard from sources during his 1 year coordinator that early on he was doing a lot of things and the players weren't quite getting it. And so he quickly recognized that and saw the big mistakes they were making. And instead of saying, I can't believe KJ Wallace went under on that safety, I can't believe that Kyle Hamilton and DJ Brown had those bad fits, I can't believe this guy I'm clearly putting too much on them, that these smart kids are making mental mistakes. And they changed pretty quickly.
Yep.
And by the end of the year, they were playing elite football, because everybody talks about, how bad the teams were they played down the stretch. True. But what they did play down the stretch is a lot of teams that had really good offenses, and they still shut them down for the most part. And so we saw a lot of that success. Now, they weren't perfect. The North Carolina game and the scrambles were problematic, but then they bounced back from that with just brilliant performances after that. And the changes that he made were very much I'm putting too much on them. It's not allowing them to play fast and play sound and be physical.
Yep.
And Al Golden was that on steroids, in my opinion. Because so much of what Al Golden was doing was based on stops coming from scheme. Now, scheme is important, and anyone that tells you otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about. Scheme is important. You've got to put them in position to be successful, and then you've got to allow them to go then play their game. The counter to that, however, is when you put too much emphasis on scheme, it becomes more about we're making stops because of all the different things we do. And if you're going to put your emphasis on making stops on scheme, it means you're going to feel the need to have a check for everything, an adjustment for everything, a counter to this, a counter to that, where sometimes it's just like, go make a play. right? I just need you to go make a play. I'm not going to give you a million checks. Yes, if they switch this strength from here to here, we've got to make a check to this, but go play football. Go make a play. And I think that Al Golden did way too much, understandably, where he came from at the NFL. You can't just go play. If you just try to line up and go play, you better hope you've got 11 all-pros on your team because you're going to get ripped up in the NFL. It's not that way in college, not to the degree that we see. And so that's a big change that has to happen. Mm-hmm. That, to me, is not how I took the initial question. So I'm glad that you brought that up because that's a great point. It is philosophically – not structurally, we need to see a lot of changes.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how that's going to play out.
I mean, and every team is unique to its own self, right? I mean, like next year, like Brian coming into this year, right? You're like, okay, I have Cam Hart, who's incredibly talented corner, can play a lot of man coverage, but you're like Clarence Lewis, that's not really his game, right? Like you need to mix and match zone, for instance, right? To make him as good as possible as an outside corner. Well, going into next year, if you have Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison at corner, I would hope that you're playing a little more man, right? Like I would hope so, or at least some match zone coverage type of stuff as well, right? Like I would hope that would change a little bit. Defensive line wise, if you have a couple really good pass rushers and you don't need to blitz as much, like philosophically, like I'm just gonna stick to 4-man pressure and just let my team roll that way, right? But then if you don't have much of a pass rush, then that's where you need to manufacture pressure. So each team is unique to itself. I think that this team this year, when you came into the season, is going to look a lot different than next year, right? Like you looked into this season, you're like, I have a known commodity in Isaiah Foskey. I have a known commodity in Jason Amalola. They can create pressure. Maybe I'll do a little bit more just 4-man pressures early on in the season. Maybe I'll mix and match zone and man because that's the corner grouping that I have right now. Next year, maybe you're more of a heavy man team because that's what you have at corner. Maybe you're more of a manufactured team as far as different pressure packages that you bring. Every
not
team
just
is
corner, but
itself.
safety too, Ryan. I mean,
exactly.
you get Peyton Bowen and Ramon Henderson and Xavier Watts. If those are your primary safeties next year, you've got a lot more man opportunities with your safeties as well, which then maybe says we can do some different things with our linebackers and from a pressure standpoint.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of different things that factor into. You may look at your defensive line and say, you know what, we're going to do a little bit more 3-down this year because we don't have, that Isaiah Foskey type this year. We got some big kids that are physical, but we don't really have that Isaiah Foskey edge type. So, we're going to go with 2 of those big kids. We're going to go with Howard and Riley in a 2-man over there, and then maybe have like a Josh Burnham, Justin Adamiola type of guy at your other end spot, and then get an extra linebacker on the field. Maybe you go about it that way and still have 5 DBs on the field. So there's a lot of things, to your point, Ryan, that could change next year, but those are more structural things. In my view, those are all structural things that are part of evolving based on your talent level, right? Like, I don't see Tommy Rees being as infatuated with 12 and 13 personnel next year as he was this year. I think this year he's always going to run 12 personnel, I believe, but your roster is going to look different next year.
Yep,
you're not going to have Michael Mayer, so you're not going to build your pass game around the tight end the way that you did this year. You're just not going to. And that was the last 2 years were somewhat. 3 years were somewhat unique because early on in 2020, it was receiver oriented a lot. I mean, you saw Javon McKinley being the guy. Now Mayer put up really good production, but it was a outside receiver, running back, tight end mix in 2020. Last year we saw it as more of a balanced mix with Mayer and Kevin Austin were big focal points of the pass game, both of them. This year was very Michael Mayer driven because that's what the personnel dictated. At least that's how he felt the personnel dictated it. So we've seen some adjustments there, but those are all structural. Those aren't philosophical. Where this Notre Dame staff needs to sort of have a heart-to-heart with themselves is what are the philosophical changes we need to make? And when I talk philosophy, I'm not talking about do you go tempo or not. I'm not talking about do you run duo or, more, mix duo in with more inside zone counter. That's structural. I think the philosophical stuff is the things that need to be, I guess tempo could be considered part of a philosophy because it involves just how you go about your business every day. So that one I think fits.
And you're not changing the structure of your offense. You're just doing it at a different pace, right?
Right.
So your point,
which requires a lot of philosophical changes from a strength conditioning standpoint because what people got to understand is if you're going to be a tempo team all the time, you got to start building for that in January. because your whole strength conditioning program is going to change. And we're not calling for that. We're just making a point that that's sort of one of those philosophical changes because it requires so much of a change in how you go about your business every day.
Right.
Whereas mixing up your run game doesn't require you to make that kind of change. It just means we're just going to practice things a little differently and maybe teach things a little bit differently. So I think that's some really good stuff there. Some really good stuff there. Here's a question, Ryan, I want to get to, a comment that I want to get to here from John Christophic. John says Drew Pine should have announced after the bowl game that he's entered the transfer portal. So here's my issue.
Mm-hmm.
Number one is what I said at the time is I didn't like his decision, but I wanted to wait till I got more information. That's what we said when it happened live.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things we'd mentioned then was we don't know the particulars of the portal stuff and all the quarterback movement that maybe he felt he had a choice. But here's what I know. Whether you agree with Notre Dame's decision or not, I respect the fact that the Notre Dame coaches went to Drew now and told him now, this is what we're doing. Before the portal opened up, before all the quarterback movement started, this is what we're doing, knowing there's a chance that he would enter the portal. Now, what I also know from talking to various sources is they didn't want him to leave. He chose to leave. They did realize that that was a possibility, that could happen, but it wasn't something that they necessarily wanted him to do.
Right.
But here's where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
When I got twofold aspects of Drew's decision. One, I'm okay with the timing of it because there is going to be a lot of quarterback movement. If he does want to be, why is he leaving? He's not leaving. His feelings were hurt, right? He was, but his feelings were hurt because he felt he'd done enough to be a starting quarterback. Right. Agree or not with him, that's what he feels. Mm-hmm. And if he feels that way, then he needs to be given an opportunity to go find that somewhere. Well, the sad reality of it is because the portal opens up now before bowl games, which is stupid, then the reality is he's got to do it now. And if he's going to go be somewhere and, now the thing I would say is if Drew is going to still have to stay for another semester to graduate, and I don't know what the timing of his graduation, then I would say maybe you could have stayed. Mm-hmm. But he has to find a new home, and he needs to make sure that he goes somewhere. You let all the dominoes fall, then you pick up the scraps of what's left. That's not an ideal situation for Drew. So I understand it. My issue is not so much that he left or the timing of when he left. My issue is how he left. Right. That's my problem. Because agree with it or not, Notre Dame coaches went to Drew face-to-face like a man and told him this is what's going on. Mm-hmm. I've been told by a lot of different sources, like at least 6 different people have told me this, that the Notre Dame staff was caught off guard. Not that he left, but that they just leaked it and did it and didn't actually tell them that he was doing it. It's kind of like we went to you like a grown man and we're face-to-face with you and gave you what we believe to be a hard truth. You can give us hard truth in return by saying you're not coming back, but you should pay us the same courtesy of letting us know you're leaving the same way we did it to you, which is face-to-face. And I think that's what has some people disappointed. That's what I'm disappointed. And I think that's the only thing Drew is going to look back on from his Notre Dame tenure and regret. I think he's going to not regret. He gave it everything he had. He was a great teammate, great leader, physically and emotionally gave you everything he had. Now, I think he was capable of playing better. That's the one thing I've never said he gave you. It's as good of a player as he's going to be. I don't think he played to his full potential. Not that he was going to look like Baker Mayfield if he would have stayed and gotten better, but he was better than the guy we saw at times this season. But as far as the things that the work ethic, the attitude, the leadership, all that character stuff, all that checks out. He's going to be proud of everything he put into this program in that regard. I think he is going to look back and say, not that I think he is wrong for being mad. He has every right to be upset with it. He has every right to think he deserved to start the bowl game. Agree or disagree with him is fine, but it's like I can respect that you hold a view, Ryan. Mm-hmm. I can respect that you think, hey, I believe I should have started the game and still not agree with you, right? Sure. I know in our country we have this thing where if we don't agree, it means you're wrong and a bad person and must be destroyed. But I don't think that way.
That's what Twitter told me.
Yeah, so Twitter tells everybody. I don't believe that. I think I can respect where you're coming from and just not agree with you. I don't agree with Drew's conclusion, but I believe he believes it wholeheartedly, and he's worked his butt off to get there. I have no problem with him being upset. I have no problem with him leaving. I respect it. I'll always have Drew's back in that regard. I just think he's going to look back in 10 years and be like, man, I just should have handled it a little bit differently. Yeah. I think that's the thing that would be my advice to him if I were to look back and say, hey, what would you have changed? What would you have done differently? That's the only thing. If I was advising Drew, that's the only thing I would have done differently is just, hey, man, go to them face to face and let them know. Or at least call them, do a FaceTime or a Zoom with them, or at least you get some sort of face to face. Don't just make them find out because it got leaked by Pete Thamel. That would be my only issue.
And the transfer portal really does force your hand, doesn't it, man? Like
timing-wise, yeah.
It's gross how much it – yeah, I mean, it's his choice to enter, but, like, to the timing portion of it for sure. I mean, Brian, right now we already have 2 quarterbacks that I know of that have already committed to a new school, and I look at it like, okay, Phil Jurkovic's going to Pittsburgh, right? Cade McNamara's going to Iowa. Those could have been 2 potential fits for Drew Pine, potentially, right? Like, couldn't you see him fitting into a Pittsburgh team pretty well or an Iowa team pretty well? Like, that may have been in – solid fit for Drew. So unfortunately, I think the system of how the transfer portal is run is forcing kids' hands a lot. I do think that if it was opened at a little bit of a later date, that maybe some kids would see it all the way through. But to your point, that's what the market is dictating right now. So it's unfortunate in that regard, but I agree completely. Because as soon as you called me the one night after it happens and just talked about kind of the circumstances, I didn't anticipate it ending like that for Drew Pine. Yeah. And I have a very high opinion of him as a young man. I haven't heard anything negative about him in the past. And I think that he did give mentally and physically, to your point, everything that he had, right? Like, he tried hard day in and day out. And it is unfortunate that this is the last part of the puzzle, because I think that it should have been a different way. I expected him to transfer, but the circumstances I expected to be a lot different, for sure.
Next question here we have from Bobby Halfacre. Thank you, Bobby. Brian and Ryan, just curious, what would you guys think of either Hudson Card from Texas or the kid from NC State, Devin Leary, would either open up the offense and the up that we've heard so much about? We'll take them one by one.
Sure.
Let's start with Hudson Card.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, him and Devin O'Leary come from very different experience backgrounds. Hudson Card has been a spot starter. He's not been a full-time starter. I think he's played pretty well at times in the games he played, especially this year. He doesn't have the experience Devin Leary has, but let's just kind of talk about what he brings to the table. Number one, 2 years of left instead of just one.
Yep.
2 years to actually play. Again, we explained this the other day. He could be at Notre Dame for 3 years, but one of them would have to involve him redshirting, and that's not something Notre Dame or Hudson Card are interested in doing. Notre Dame is obviously one of the teams involved here. I would imagine other programs are also pushing for Hudson Card.
Mm-hmm.
But he is a kid to me, Ryan, that would he open up the offense? Yes, I believe he would. Why don't you take first crack as far as explaining what? Because I know we both agree that he would open up the offense. To the degree, that can be discussed. But, Ryan, what are some of the things that, first of all, you see from Hudson Card on? Because we've both spent a lot of time watching all 22 film from the last 2 years. So we've really had a chance to break down Hudson Card.
Well, I think for me, he has a nice physical profile as far as being a dual threat quarterback, right? Like, he has a good amount of arm strength. I actually thought he threw a pretty nice deep ball for the most part. Like, there were a couple misses on film, but I thought that he was able to push the ball down the field a little bit, and he's a good athlete. And I think the potential that he brings also, Brian, that we haven't personally talked about, I think, together, is that some of the things that you want to do with a Tyler Buckner when he's fully healthy, right? With some of the read zone stuff and the quarterback run game and maybe move in the pocket a little bit at times. You can do all that stuff with Hudson Card as well, and he could effectively do that, right? Like, he's not exactly the runner.
He's not going to do it. He's going to be more of a chain mover as opposed to a dynamic guy. But, yes, you don't lose completely the element of read zone, quarterbacks running type of thing from it, yes.
When Tyler Buckner gets hurt and Drew Pine becomes your quarterback, your offense is just going to look a little bit different. Some of the philosophical things, moving from a Buckner to a Card or a Card to the Buckner will be a little different, but structurally it'll be the same, right? You can still run the read zone stuff. You can still run the RPO stuff. You could still do all the stuff that you potentially want to do because your quarterback is a good athlete. It's just going to look a little different when Buckner's running a comparative to Card, to your point, right? But I think structurally you can stay the same and a cohesive offense moving forward. And I think from a athleticism perspective, Card is a good overall athlete, can move the chains, can do some read zone stuff. He's a good athlete overall, but I think his arm is plus in that regard, right? He can push the ball down the field. I think he can open things up too, because I think that he can run a lot of spread stuff and be able to work some outside verticals and do all that type of stuff. So I like Hudson Card, man. I think that he has a nice physical profile. From a what you're looking for perspective in the quarterback room, this is more the standard that you want to look for, right? Like if Hudson Card is developed properly, I can buy into him having NFL tools because he has a good arm. He is a good athlete. He is a pretty big kid. I mean, he's 6'2", 200 plus pounds, and he still has substantial room to put weight on his frame if that's what you choose to do. So I think that he can do all those things, and I think structurally you can keep the offense the same.
I think things I like about him relative to what he would bring to the Notre Dame offense, Ryan, you talked a lot about that. I think he would bring, if you compare him to Tyler Buckner, for example, Tyler brings more dynamic running ability, significantly more so. I think the attractiveness to a guy like Hudson Card is as much as I love Tyler Buckner's potential, what he has not shown in games, whether it was last season against Virginia Tech and some other games or this season, is he has not carried the anticipation skills we see from him in practice into Saturdays, number one. Number two, his ball placement leaves a lot to be desired, even on completions. I think those are things to me that Hudson Card, I think, thrives at. Neither of them have huge arms, but Tyler Buckner has been a guy that in the past, in high school and in practice, and even in 2021, showed really nice touchdown the field throwing the football. Hudson Card struggled with that, I thought, in 2021. Mm-hmm. I thought he was better in that area in 2022.
Yep.
So, and part of that's having better receivers and just knowing the system a little bit more. And even then, it's still hard to fully evaluate it because he's going from backup, getting most of his reps with backups, to being thrust into the starting lineup, where he's throwing deep balls to guys he hasn't necessarily spent as much time throwing the ball to, which is part of it.
Sure.
But I think he does bring a lot of that to the table. And the reality is he can get the ball out quick. He's a very quick decision maker on Saturdays. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that helps him. And the other part, too, is he's coming from a system that's very complex in a lot. Steve Sarkisian doesn't run a million plays, but there's a lot of different reads and a lot of different layers to what he does. And so I think you're gonna have to be a kid that knows how to make checks, that knows how to go process through full field reads and all those type of things to run a Steve Sarkisian offense. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Would you agree with 100%. That, Ryan?
Yep. Should be an easy transition from a mental perspective. No doubt about it.
Devin Leary is an interesting one. We put this on the message board. So I'm hearing from sources on one side that make me believe that I don't think Notre Dame is going to be the place for Devin Leary. I hear that on one side. Then I have someone reach out to me from the other side and say that people on the NC State side of things think that Notre Dame is where he's going to end up. So we'll see how this all plays out. So what we're about to say is not us saying we think Devin Leary is a legitimate candidate. We have put up our opinion on the message board. I'm going to continue to do some digging, but I have my doubts right now about whether or not he's going to be a candidate. Let's talk about Devin Leary, and we'll begin with the negative. The biggest question mark that I have about Devin Leary and the biggest red flag for me of what I know about Devin Leary is I am very nervous about taking a kid with his checkered injury history and putting him in a quarterback at Notre Dame. You've got the upper body injury this year, which cost him a whole season. You have the lower body injury 2 years ago before his great year. He's basically the college version of what Tyler Buckner was in high school. One great year surrounded by 2 years where his season was cut short by injuries. How's that any different than Tyler Buckner? Because here's the reality of it. The reason that makes me nervous, Ryan, is if Tyler Buckner doesn't get hurt this year, I don't think we're having this conversation.
Probably not.
I don't think we're talking about a transfer portal quarterback because he'd had the 12 games under his belt to go out there and prove what he was, and I think he would have been really good. But that's me projecting. I don't know that because he got hurt again.
Sure.
You can't go into next season with two incredibly talented players with huge checkered past from an injury standpoint and feel really good about it. You also have to consider the fact that Devin Leary's not going to be allowed to start throwing again until around spring ball, which means he's going to miss several months of work with the current group of receivers and from a timing standpoint. That can't be ignored. It can't be ignored, especially. So, like, if I were to say Devin Leary's here and Hudson Card is here, all the other intangibles have to put Hudson Card ahead of him, in my opinion. So when I look at those two guys, that's how I feel. Having said that, if you were to tell me that Devin Leary is going to check all the boxes off the field, all the boxes at classroom, all the boxes leadership-wise, and you knew for a fact that he was going to be 100% healthy all year next year, he's one of the best in the market because he's a very talented thrower of the football, Ryan.
Yeah, and he's another kid, Brian, that I think that he throws an exceptional deep ball, man. He can really his pace of velocity is good to the short to intermediate level of the field, but I think the difference is that he really knows how to throw a touch down the field, and he does it incredibly well. I think he's a pretty quick processor. He's a really tough kid, which I think is a reason for a little bit of the injuries at times, right? Because he's not afraid to stay in there and get his nose dirty, right? But I mean, Brian, for me, the one thing that I really like about Devin Leary a ton too is I think when you go back to the 2021 film where he was phenomenal, 35 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, some of his best work is off of play action. He's a really, really dangerous play action quarterback, pushing it intermediate to deep. And when he had Zonovan Knight and he had Ricky Person running the football 2 seasons ago, he looked like one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. And I think that structurally, if it did make sense for Notre Dame, going into next season, having Audric Estime, Logan Diggs, and that running back room to work off of the play action game and do those types of things, I think Devin Leary would be a good fit structurally into this offense. It's just, to your point, can you depend on him health-wise? Does he fit into the program? Those are the question marks that we have, and I think that it will be a tiebreaker potentially to which guy you end up picking or the guy that you end up honing in on.
We have another portal question that I'm just going to kind of get down to here, Ryan, just to kind of stay on track with that. And where was it? There was one about Pratt. Here we go from Derek Calmer. He says, does Notre Dame wait around for a guy like Michael Pratt? That feels like a Dante Moore situation over again, eggs in one basket. Obviously, Michael Pratt is the quarterback at Tulane. It's not known if he will jump in the portal. There's a lot of talk that he would, but that talk about him going in the portal surfaced around when Willie Fritz was supposedly going to be leaving to go to Georgia Tech.
Right.
Now, Fritz is staying, at least for now. I don't know if that means he's definitely staying at Tulane. It definitely means he's not taking the Georgia Tech job. There's still other jobs out there to be had, but I don't know if any of them would be necessarily that much more attractive to him than Georgia Tech. Louisville, I don't know what those jobs are. If I'm Louisville, I'm keen on one dude and one dude only. I'm basically – and I can give them, hey, my wife and I stay in West Lafayette for a week. I can give them some tips on where they can stay until they can convince Jeff Brom to take the job. That's what I'm doing if I'm Louisville. Having said that, Michael Pratt's an intriguing player, Ryan, because of the 3 guys we talked about, just pure arm talent. He's got the best arm talent out there. He's got a very live arm. Yep. When his mechanics are right, he throws a very catchable ball as well, very accurate ball. Couple things that one of the big concerns I had about him was that Tulane doesn't ask him to do a whole lot. Well, they asked him to do a lot more in the AAC title game, and he ripped UCF up. So that was good to see.
Yep.
But he's a good athlete, not a great athlete, but he's a good athlete. But he doesn't avoid pressure the way that you would think a guy that runs like he runs can avoid. And my point is, there's a lot to be intrigued by. And if we're talking about NFL draft, it's him, Hudson Card, and Devin Leary, because Devin Leary has huge medicals, right?
Yes.
But Michael Pratt's clearly here for me. Experience, production, all that stuff. But he's also going to need some refinement, in my opinion. And that would be my one concern is, do you really want to take a guy that you got to kind of refine him to fit what you do? because he was great at that level,
mm-hmm.
but he was able to get away with things because he was playing at that level.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't get away with those things against Kansas State. He was a 500 pass or 50% passer in that game. It was one of his worst games of the year. He hasn't been great in those moments. He was pretty good against Oklahoma 2 years ago, but their defense stinks. Ole Miss, he wasn't as good against Ole Miss last year. He wasn't very good against Kansas State this year. His team won, but he was not because of him necessarily. So that's my concern, is that jump up again in talent. Can he get away with the things that, like, he's fit some throws in there? I'm like, well, that's a great throw, but that's not working against Bama, or that's not working against Georgia. You know what I mean, Ryan?
Mm-hmm.
And that would be one of the concerns I have about Michael Pratt. But just pure God-given ability, and that kid's really good. He's really good.
And he's a really talented kid. I mean, it doesn't take long either, Brian. He's like one of those like two throw guys where you're just like, yep, ball comes out nice, man. Like the ball comes out with extreme amount of velocity. I mean, you're talking about the guys that can fit tight windows. This is the best guy that we talked about today. Like Card can do it to a degree. Leary has done it, but I mean, Pratt, he can test some windows, man, and he can push the ball vertically. I mean, I've seen him throw some really nice touch throws outside the numbers, you know, in a couple games this year. I agree that there's a little more volatility to him from a playing style perspective. I agree. I think that he needs refinements. I do not argue against that at all. The only thing I'll say, though, is that if you believe in your coaching staff and you believe that you can get the best out of a player, then it's not even a comparison, right? Like if you get the best out of Michael Pratt, then you got a dude, man. You got a dude.
I gave my opinion, right? I'm sure the Notre Dame coaching staff has a different opinion of their ability to develop players.
Sure.
My whole thing, though, is I don't know if I want to do that. Unless a guy is so much better than another player that it's worth it to me. But they're also right that you got to run the risk of, if you wait around and put all your eggs in the Michael Pratt basket, and what if he doesn't jump in the portal? What if he takes an NIL deal somewhere else? Right. Now you're stuck without a quarterback. You can't afford that.
That's true.
He's not that much better that you can do that. If Drake May liked us as a coaching staff, and he liked us, and he was actually going to be open if he jumps in the portal, and was actually, like, it's funny, CBS thing had a report today that they expect Drake May to jump in the portal. And,
like 3 days ago?
And they made it seem like he'd be open. I'm like, y'all, Drake May is not jumping the portal. I'm like, okay, I'm starting my recruitment over again. He's going in there with schools he knows he's going to look at. Come on, y'all.
He knows where he's going to go.
Mac Brown's flat out said it. I mean, he didn't say Drake May. People keep saying Mac Brown said Drake May. He didn't say Drake May. He just said, I had a starter who has 15 offers and NIL offers already. It's ridiculous. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not a big fan of what Drake May is doing. And I'll be honest to you as well. I wouldn't love it if Michael Pratt jumped in. That would say something to me if Michael Pratt jumped in the portal. Like, your team just won an AAC championship. Your coach is committed 3 years to building you up. You were a kid who, let's look at what his high school ranking was.
He was like a 3-star kid
coming out of high school, right?
Yeah.
So you were let's pull it up here real quick. According to the On3 consensus, you were the number 1,150 player in the country. Mm-hmm. You know, 247 had you as the number 1,365 player in the country. That school recruited you, built you up, turned you into a guy that people did covet. You all went to the Cotton Bowl together, and you're going to bail, right? Like, that just doesn't sit well with me, Ryan, especially for a quarterback. You know, and I understand how he's got to do what's best for him and all that. Well, what does that mean next year if he's got a bad ankle injury and he's got NFL draft on the line? Is he going to play through that injury, or is he going to do what's best for him and not play?
Right.
You know, like, that says something to me. It may not be fair, but that's how I view it. And I feel the same way about Drake May, to be completely honest with you. You know, like,
it would have been a lot different, because when we started hearing about the Michael Pratt stuff, it was because Willie Fritz was going to leave.
Correct.
Right? Like, that's a completely different.
Then I'd have had no problem. No problem. No problem.
Yep. Because if coach leaves, then exactly.
All bets are off, man. All bets are off at that point in time. So yes, you are correct. You are correct. So I'm very curious how that's going. And you know, he's talking. People, you can't wait. Look, let me explain something about this question too. It's not legal. But these kids in there, they're every school in the country that wants Michael Pratt is having conversations with Michael Pratt, or at least his people,
Brian,
right? I mean, come on.
Can I say this? I'll say this, and I'm not going to say names or anything, but I am friends with a person that works in a recruiting department of a school, a Power 5 school as well, that there's a player that just entered the portal that they have been talking to since the summer. Guys, this is not something that just happens. Literally, they've been talking to him for months in case he entered the portal after this season. So this stuff happens, man. You can hate it, you can loathe it, and a lot of it I do. But this is the world we live in. These decisions are not made as soon as these kids enter the portal. These are decisions that have been made for weeks, months. It's just the reality of where we are right now.
It's and schools do it because they know the NCAA will do nothing about it.
Oh, no.
Not a dang thing about it.
Nothing at all.
Another portal quarterback question from John A1 is JT Daniels a guy Notre Dame should consider? Look, John, there's always going to be you always have to ask yourself that as a staff. I believe you always have to at least spend 5 minutes talking about JT Daniels, because here's the reality of it. That kid still throws a beautiful ball. And when he's on, he's really good. Even this year, Ryan, we saw it in different games where, sometimes you look at him, you're like, what happened to the kid that I remember watching? He was one of the best high school quarterbacks I've ever seen. And then there's other games this year, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's him. That's the guy. The reality is the combination of injuries have sapped him of a decent amount of his athletic ability and talent. There's also a reason he's going on his fourth school. And I don't want to get too much into that, but there's a reason for that. And it's just not worth it. The injury history alone, it's just not worth it. The other parts of it, it's just not worth it. The only way that I would bring JT Daniels in, the only way, is if you decided Buckner was your guy. You told JT that you're our backup. He's injury prone. We need a veteran that can step in and win us a championship in case he goes down. And he just wanted to get a master's degree. That'd be the only reason, because you're not going to get Hudson Card and Michael Pratt or other guys with that being the premise of the discussion.
Right.
You're not.
It's not that, the Hunter. That's the Hunter Johnson route. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That would be the only way that I would be okay with it. And then you'd say, because you also have Angeli and Kenny Minchie, to where if they both go down, you can survive. I would not like that, because I still feel like you need it. You need a guy that can come in and play, but that would be the only way I'd consider it, Ryan. Like, I didn't say that's the only way I would do it. That's the only way I would consider it. But every staff is going to spend at least a minute talking about 1 to 5 minutes talking about JT Daniels, because you're going to sit there and say, man, but because here's what it is. You said it earlier, Ryan, but what if you trust your coaches? Every quarterback's coach in the country that has confidence in himself says, man, I wonder if I could get that guy back to what he was at Mater Dei, because he was special.
Yeah.
You're going to have that thought, and then you're going to be like, no, I'm good. You know what I mean? But you're going to have that thought, Ryan, because if you can ever get him back to being that kid, he had special arm talent. Special arm talent. And I've seen it on film, and I've seen it up close and personal. Even as a sophomore in high school, you're like, this kid spins this ball as good as anybody I've seen since, Everett Golson, Jimmy Clausen at Notre Dame. And that was at an Irish invasion camp. But all the other stuff, Ryan, you can't. You can't justify with all the other stuff going on.
There's a lot of baggage, and it's not baggage of him personally. I don't know JT Daniels, but it's like you said, Brian, there's a reason that he's going to be at 4 different schools, right? There's a reason that he's lost job at multiple spots. A lot of it's due to injury, right? And that's a part of the baggage type of conversation. And this year, there were moments of really good football, and then there were moments of not really good football. So just not a kid that you can depend on right now. I mean, it's unfortunate to your degree, because there was a reason that he was once a 5-star recruit, right? And there's a reason that he reclassified, and he was good enough to make that jump, and he was highly coveted. Sure, all those things were there at one point. Just isn't that kid anymore, man. Unfortunately for him, it's just he's not that guy anymore. And, You're bringing in a huge wild card. You want to talk about Devin Leary being a wild card? JT Daniels is an even bigger wild card, man.
Oh, yeah.
His best production has not been nearly that of Devin Leary. Just hasn't. So, yeah, it's a hard pass for me. I don't know the kid personally. I hope he lands at a good school and he does well, but just not the guy that he once was, unfortunately.
Not even close.
No.
Not even close.
No.
And that's look, Ryan, if he was close to the guy he was, it would be a lot longer than a 5-minute conversation.
Sure.
Because if you just needed a quarterback for 1 year, so look, we'll put up with the BS if that kid can throw it like he threw it in modern day. You know what I'm saying? But he's not close to being that guy anymore. Not close. The glimpses have been very few and far between the last couple of years.
And for me, Notre Dame's a place where you don't want to bring in a bunch of baggage for different vantage points, right? It's like people keep asking about DJ Uyunglele. It's nothing against DJ's talent. I just think that the baggage that comes with him, with the just lack of confidence over the last couple of years, especially in how he doesn't fit in the system, I just don't think the fit makes sense, right? Like I just don't think it makes sense. Yeah,
agree. Got some more portal questions here, but we'll kind of start going back to the top and just kind of working through different ones. The worst 2K big men HD. How many quarterbacks will we see in the game, and will they be allowed to run the normal offense? To the second one, yes, Notre Dame's going to run their offense. I mean, they're going to run their normal offense. I don't think we're going to see the heavy dose of quarterback runs from Tyler Buchner. I don't think you need to. The reason you needed to do it early in the year is because your offensive line and your run game weren't going yet. You've got that now, and you're going against a team that's not very good at stopping the run. Now, neither was USC. So there is an element to where if they want to load the box, like if you'd have had a healthy Tyler Buchner against USC, that game would have looked a lot different. Because you would not have been able to slow. Because like one of the things about Notre Dame throwing the ball is their possessions went by a little quicker, and that's not really where you necessarily wanted to be against that USC team. If you could have been able to grind out the first couple series and move the chains a little bit more, let's say on second and 6 or 7, they're crashing hard up the middle, and Tyler Buchner keeps a read zone and he just runs outside for 15 yards. All of a sudden, bam, you've moved the chains and you're rolling. But I'm not making it the heavy dose of who we are, essentially, But they're still going to run the offense because that you weren't doing that with Drew Pine, so it'll still be that offense. How many quarterbacks will we see? Well, I hope we see 2, even if Tyler Buchner's the starter and plays every meaningful snap. I hope we see 2 because that would mean there's a blowout, right? I would love to see a blowout and get Steve Angeli in the game, but so I hope we see 2. I don't know if Notre Dame knows what their plan is for that yet. They need to see, because there's a lot of things you got to learn about Tyler. But what's his conditioning level over the next 12 practices or so? How's he getting through practices physically? Is because you can measure all that stuff now with all the different things that they have to measure your speed and all your fatigue factor and all these different things that they have technologically wise. Right, they can see, boy, he's really wearing down halfway through practice. His playing conditioning is not where it needs to be because he hasn't practiced and played. Then you may say, hey, we got to have a plan for Steve to play every 4th series or something like that. It'll dictate kind of the game plan you put together as well. But you don't know the answers to those things. You may think right now, hey, we're going to start him and he's going to play every snap, every meaningful snap or whatever. But you've got to evaluate that stuff as you go through practice to make sure, did he wear down later in practices? Okay, well, I can't have him wearing down in the 4th quarter of a game, especially if it's a tight game. All those things still have to be monitored and determined. And that's why I think people that say he's going to start and be let's pump the brakes a little bit because a lot has to happen between now and then.
I have no idea. I mean, Brian, do you have any idea what we're going to see from Tyler Buchner? Like, I have no idea what to expect. I don't know. Is he going to come out playing well? Is he going to come out rusty? Is he going to come out, in the condition level to the highest degree? Like, I have no idea. You want to talk about an outlier? You want to talk about a question mark? Tyler could be fantastic in this game, or he could be rusty and not up to snuff, or he could be a guy that just is not ready to play a full football game. I don't know what to expect, guys. So if you're asking me my prediction, I predict that we're going to see 2 quarterbacks. What's the reason for seeing the second? Not 100% sure right now. I'm not. It really is dependent on who Tyler is right now. It's a question mark for me. I don't know. I didn't think that he would even be playing in this football game. So the fact that he is just a question mark for me.
But my thing is, Ryan, is even if I knew that when he's on the field, he's going to play well, even if I knew that, if I had full confidence in that, my whole point is you need to see him go through full practices first before you know if he's going to be able to play for 4 quarters.
For sure.
And that's my point of what you need to learn. I mean, your stuff is true because he started 2 games. I don't know what Tyler Buckner we're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
My whole point is before you even get there is what's his work volume going to be? That has to be assessed first. Yep. And that'll be determined over the next, 12, 13 practices as they get deeper into bowl prep and as they measure the analytics, not the analytics, but the metrics and different things of his speed, his energy, his conditioning, how he bounces back the next day. Because that's another thing that shows me that my conditioning level is improving is, yes, I faded down at the end of practice for 3 days in a row, but my speed at the beginning of practice I was bouncing back better. Where at the beginning of practice, boy, I just after a really hard work volume day, I was dragging the next day. Well, now I'm still wearing down late in practice, but I'm now bouncing back quicker. That's an evolution towards I'm getting back to being full speed. And then maybe the week beforehand, he's bouncing back and he's lasting full practices, and you feel good about him being able to play the full game. What I'm saying is there's no way you can know that right now. I don't care what their intentions are. I don't care what they're telling sources and all that other kind of stuff. I'm telling you, practically speaking, there's no way they can know right now, based on what we were told about what he was doing in practice before the bowl game was announced, that you could have any clue that he's ready to play a 4-quarter football game right now. There's no way you can know that. No way you can know that. And that's why it's still unknown how many quarterbacks you're going to see, because we don't know yet if he can go through a full game. I would imagine that he's close to that. I would imagine his other conditioning stuff that he's doing with trainers is making them feel confident in that. But you can't possibly know that from a football prep standpoint until he's out there playing football every day and taking live reps and running around and doing all those type of things, throwing 300 passes and maybe taking a couple shots, or at least getting banged around a little bit, that you're going to know that he's going to have the energy and endurance to do that, right?
Yeah. Nah, I mean, it's great. It's all great points. I just love that you accidentally said analytics, man. I know analytics is always on the top of your mind. It's a little Freudian slip and all.
That's why I almost threw up as soon as I said it. But I said, analytics are absolutely a useful tool.
100%.
If they're used correctly. My problem is you have all these people that don't know how to use analytics because they don't know the game. And that's the problem.
But they have an awesome algorithm. So that's all that matters.
Right. But does it account for, okay, our long snapper's not good, or we have this, or this, there's just so much that goes into it. That's why you need people to still still do that.
It's like is the quarterback going to shrink in the big moments, right? Like analytics can't tell me that. Can't tell me that, unfortunately.
We've had some questions from people, Ryan, asking us about, do we believe such and such player will jump in the portal? We're not going to go there.
Yeah.
We're not. I mean, I know of what was it? What was the list I gave you the other day, Ryan? 10 guys, there. But it's just but some of these kids have the right to change their mind. Some of these kids may not want that information out right now. Some of these kids are not actually going to. Some of the kids that won't be on the team next year aren't actually going to leave. Some of them may stay, finish their degree, and some of them are medical. So when the kids are ready to announce, they'll announce and we'll discuss it. We knew Osita was going to jump in. We knew the only one that we didn't know about was Drew Pine. That's the only one that we were not aware of. So there will be other guys. We're not going to get into and on the message board, we'll let you know if this is a guy that we knew about or not. Like if a kid jumps in the portal and you're like, wow, I didn't know that, then we'll say, hey, look, we did not see this one coming. So you'll kind of have an idea about it. But I just, it's kind of like taking a kid's moment in recruiting. Like, what if I say now, hey, so-and-so is going to jump in the portal based on what I'm told, but then he changes his mind, or his parents have a talk with the coaches, and say, hey, look, we're going to get him straight. Don't worry. And we just give him one more shot. But now he's got that taint of he was going to jump in a portal over his head. He's got to shake. That may happen anyway, because I can't promise that other people won't report that if they know the information we know, but we're just not going to do that.
I mean, we have sources that literally are just tweeting out. They clearly have access to the transfer portal, so they're just tweeting out every single player in the portal instead of waiting for that kid to make his announcement. So yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
John A1, how do you build a team that wants to stick together in the bowl period? Guys are opting out of playoff games right now. College football is dying, and I don't think he's being hyperbolic at all.
I don't think
college football, as we know it, is dying. And unless someone with leadership steps up, it's going to continue to do so. And part of me wonders if some of these people want it to happen. That's a whole different conversation for a whole different day, and it's hard for me to say it without getting into politics. But I absolutely think that there are people that are part of college football's leadership that have no problem with college football dying because they don't really like college football to begin with. That's just my belief, and we're going to take that into another conversation. But the guy out there on the platform, I assume he's talking about Jackson Smith and Jigba, but that's a little bit of a different situation just because he's been injured all year, and I thought he was going to play. And there's rumblings he might be able to play at the end of the year. I'm a little surprised by it, John. I really am, but I think it's a little bit of a different situation because of the fact that he's been hurt all year. But yeah, it really surprised me. It really surprised me he wasn't at least going to try to get ready to play in a playoff game. And okay, what if you can't play in the semifinal? You can't play in the championship? That didn't sit well with me. It really didn't sit well with me at all. So that's an interesting one that I've kind of really want to learn a little bit more about. So we'll see kind of how that one plays out. But how do you build a team that wants to stick together? You just find out guys who are bought in. I think that's kind of the thing that you're evaluating, John, is I don't know if right now they're in position to build a team that wants to stick together as much as it's evaluating who wants to stick together and then saying next year we're building around those guys, and the guys that don't want to be part of this, you're either going to get benched or something like that needs to get kind of dealt with, and the guy needs to go. So I think it's as much of an evaluation of how to build that, John, because at the end of the day, building that it's about the people. Do you have guys, have you created a culture of guys that are totally bought in? I don't think that happens between USC and bowl prep. If it wasn't there before, it's not going to be here now. It's about evaluating who wants to be here, building around those guys during bowl prep. And if a kid's dragging over here, his attitude's not right, and he's a starter, hey, look, man, I don't need this mess from you. Okay, if you don't want to be here, don't be here. If you think you need to sit out or whatever, then sit out. We're going to go forward, guys. I want to be here. Then that helps you build the culture for next year where you'll have more guys kind of staying around and buying in. That's what I think is it's about, as more so than it is about doing it now. It's about creating the kind of culture where these kids take such pride in putting on that gold helmet that sitting out a bowl game, they have to be talked into it. Mm-hmm. That's really what it boils down to for me. And that takes time, and I don't think that can be done right now.
Well, I mean, Brian, you called this an evaluation period, right? Can't this be an evaluation period for also seeing what kids rise to the challenge, right? If there's like some borderline players, to your point, right? Like it doesn't have to be, not every decision that's made has to be made right now from defections from the roster or players that you want back necessarily, to the question, John. Like I think that there's some players that maybe Notre Dame might even be on the fence about right now, and they kind of want to see, how does this player respond to the adversity? How do they respond to us, really harping on the ideals that we live upon as a program? So I think that this is a huge opportunity, not only from just, again, re-emphasizing the standards, the vision, but also seeing how some players fit into that vision. Because I think that there are some players on the roster that seem like they might be a part of this solution, but maybe they aren't fully, right? So I think this is a test period for a lot of people, and it's going to be interesting to see, because we know the defections that we should expect in the near future, but could that number be bigger? Could that number be smaller? I think that's the question that we're still kind of working out with.
All right, let's get to some more questions here. So we have from Brian Hockney. Brian asks, who is your top receiver in the portal that is Notre Dame interest? Ryan, I believe we have the same guy, correct? Mm-hmm. So do you want to go ahead and dive into that one?
Yeah, I mean, they've offered 2 wide receivers that are in the portal right now. I would say my top guy is Dante Cephas, absolutely, from Kent State. I'm assuming that's who Brian likes as well. Mm-hmm. I know we've both have taken a look at his film a little bit, and I mean, Brian, for me, I think that the smoothness and explosiveness that he played with is really intriguing. I think that he could be a kid that could work inside and out, and he's done that at Kent State. Tracks the football pretty well, but I think that the dynamic ability that he has with the football in his hands, I've seen him have some run after catch ability, alignment versatility. This kid is a player that if Notre Dame's able to land him, because I mean, there's going to be a lot of suitors for him, right? You talk about he's a Pittsburgh kid. Pittsburgh's offered, Penn State's offered. I think he's reported a couple more offers today. We'll see what happens with Colorado, because his former head coach at Kent State just went over to Colorado to be the offensive coordinator. So are they going to be in the running at some point? So I think there's going to be a lot of competition for him, but I think that he fits very solidly in as a slot receiver that can also play outside and do a lot of things for you. So I like Dante Cephas a ton out of Kent State. Kent State quietly has a couple really good pass catchers this past season, man, very quietly.
Yeah. Somebody said this about the Drew Pine thing, Ryan. I'll bring this up too. I agree with everything you said. I love the kid. He's smooth. He's electric.
Yep.
He's really good with the ball in his hands. Really, really like that kid a lot. I just don't think right now Notre Dame's a school that's going to get him as of right now.
Agree.
Keegan Johnson is a kid that is a good player. He's good with the – Keegan Johnson does a lot of things that Cephas does. He just doesn't do them as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's got some speed. He's got some elusiveness. He's not a real explosive guy, but he's a quality athlete. You know, he had some good production at Iowa. He would be a really nice – he reminds me a lot. He could do a lot of things for Notre Dame that Avery Davis did. He's just not quite as twitchy as Avery was, in my opinion, athletically. But I think he could do a lot of things that Avery Davis brought to the table. I think Cephas could do those at a much higher level, but also could project outside a little bit more. I don't think Keegan Johnson, for a team trying to win a championship, is an outside guy, in my opinion.
Agree.
And, you know, so he's a nice player, but he's more of a depth piece, where Cephas is coming in and potentially starting as a slot guy.
And Johnson's coming off of an injury this past year as well, right? Because I know he
had
a pretty nice freshman year. I think he averaged like 19 yards a catch, almost had 400 yards, but he was limited obviously this year. Dante Cephas, although it's the MAC, I get it.
Yeah,
he's had 2 really nice years of production in a row.
But Ryan, he had 6 catches for over 100 yards against Washington.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So, like, the kid's played against Division I schools and played well. He's also played a lot. You have a lot of film to watch of him. Now, he was also a little bit banged up this year, but it was like it was minor stuff, you know. And he ended up not playing the end of the year. But you know, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that you kind of knew he was leaving. But like this year against Washington, he had 6 catches for 105 yards. Against Oklahoma, he had 4 catches for 50 yards. He had 3 catches for 25 yards against Georgia. So he played against – he had 3 catches for 21 against A&M last year, 2 for 8 against Iowa in their pass defense. But then the next week, he goes out and has 10 for 151 and a touchdown against Maryland. In the bowl game last year, he had 4 catches for 116 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, 2020, the MAC only played MAC teams. So he's got a lot of it. You've got a lot of film on him against Power 5 teams to varying levels of success, but that's, again, not all part of just the receiver. Part of it's on the quarterback and the pressure and all that stuff. But you've got a lot of film on that kid, and we've seen a lot of film of him. I mean, that's the only film I watched of him, Ryan. I didn't watch him tear up Ohio. I don't care. Just like I don't care about Keegan Johnson having 2 catches for 92 yards last year in 2021 against Colorado State. I don't care. Like, a mediocre receiver can go for 2 for 92 against Colorado State. They're terrible. I want to see why you only had 3 for 25 against Georgia. And you say, okay, this kid's battling, getting open. Quarterback was just getting overwhelmed. Or he was looking – he couldn't get to him in the reads and things like that. I mean, you can see those things in those games. You're like, okay, they didn't lock him down. They didn't put clamps down on that kid the way you'd think they would a MAC receiver. That's the stuff I look for. It's not that, he had 14 catches for 260 yards against Ohio. They don't play Ohio. And him playing that well against the teams that are like Ohio doesn't matter to me. Can he help you beat USC, Clemson, Ohio State, go to the playoff and win? And you see stuff from him. And Keegan Johnson in a role can help you with that too. He's just not going to be a dude the way that I think Dante Cephas can be a dude. But again, at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to matter.
Well, and that's really important why we push to watch the film, right? Because I think that the box score does not always tell the story. I mean, I was watching I think he was a Southern Miss wide receiver for the year, whose name I forget right now, but he's a good football player. I mean, I watched the film against Alabama. He had like 2 catches for 15 yards, and people I think would look at that box score and be like, "Oh, he didn't do anything against Alabama." And I'm like, he put them in a lot of tough situations, man. They just couldn't get him the football. Right. Like, it's very different. But,
well, we've talked about that. Receiver can't throw the ball to himself,
right?
And that's why you got to look at the film. Right. And sometimes you look at the film and be like, the kid had 5 catches for 120 yards. And you're like, oh, wow, that looks good. And then you look at the film and you're like, yeah, it was 2 blown coverages. And, and he had 2 catches against the backups. And, this doesn't have the same ring to it. Right. Or you can see a kid catch 3 passes for 20. And this kid was putting in work. Quarterback had no time to throw the football. And the quarterback couldn't get past his first read. But man, this kid was getting separation, was kind of getting open. You put him in our system with the talent around him that we'll have, and our quarterback looking at it from another team standpoint. Boy, this kid could be a pretty good football player, and I think he would fit Notre Dame's system very well. I just, like you said, I think it's going to take some convincing for schools to get him away from where we think he's going to go.
A lot of suitors.
Yep. All right, let's get to the next one. We have that question. Marion Hockney also asks, do you think that they'll have changes this portal going forward? They have to. I don't know if they will. I have no faith in the NCAA, Ryan, but they have to. This can't continue.
You would hope so. Yeah,
because there's so many kids getting screwed by this.
It's the Wild West.
It's disgusting.
Brian, I woke up and last night they got to 1,000 players enter the portal in the first day, man.
It's over 3,000 now, Ryan.
It's crazy.
It's up to, and for people to say, I don't understand why you're against this. Are you against kids getting paid? The stuff schools are doing now, if they did it in the professional sports, you'd be losing draft picks and getting fined millions of dollars for doing. The thing that you're talking about, the portal kid that we know about, I know who you're talking about. Yeah. If that happened in the National Football League, that school, that's not even close to how the Miami Dolphins,
high-level tampering.
The Miami Dolphins lost a first-round draft pick and millions of dollars and were fined millions of dollars for not doing anything close to what teams are doing with Drake May. Not even close.
Yeah.
Not even close. So don't tell me, well, you're afraid kid. I don't have a problem with kids making money. I have a problem with this. This is wrong.
And again, NIL is not improper benefits, guys, right? It's not pay to play. It's different. So I mean, there's a lot of shady things happening.
If you are not allowed to tamper, but a kid says, I'm going to bet on myself, I'm going to jump in a portal and then see what offers are out there, that's a little different story. I don't love that because it's not supposed to be used as an enticement. You're not supposed to be using NIL as an enticement, but whatever. I can live with that.
Yeah.
Right? If Drake May wants to jump in and see what's out there, okay. Sure, you do realize you run the risk of not having a spot to go back to if you don't think you're going to get the offers you think you're going to get. But what we're seeing now, this kid's trying to go play a championship game and he's got schools calling him and offering him money and doing all this other kind of stuff. Well, what are we doing here?
And I would just like to say again, because I feel like people try to paint this as like we're anti-player, we're pro-player.
It's still anyone that says that is just being purposely ignorant of our discussion.
We're not saying this is wrong of the players to take advantage of this. No, I would take advantage of the same thing.
I'm not. Did I just yell? Did I just say anything, or you say anything about these kids are scumbags? No, it's they can't allow this to be the system.
The adults.
It's like the Drew Pine thing. Drew Pine had no choice but to go in the portal now because that's the system that was created.
Right.
So I'm not going to bang on him for he's supposed to be loyal to a team that's benching him to the point where there's no jobs left if he waits until after the bowl game. Why? That's dumb. Right. But he shouldn't be in the position where he has to make that decision is my point.
Agree.
That's my point. Michael Pratt and Drake May should not know what money is out there for them right now because if you tell them it's tampering and you're going to get fined millions of dollars and you're not eligible to sign him because that's the other thing is the Dolphins wouldn't have been able to sign Tom Brady if they wanted him at that point in time. So don't tell me, well, why do you have a problem with it in professional sports? A, this isn't professional sports. B, there's a difference between saying the old school way of, people say, well, this false notion of amateurism. Just because that's the way the NCAA defined amateurism is not the only way amateurism is defined. Okay? Because here's the thing. Don't cry to me when schools are processing kids out of their system to make way for transfers. Don't cry to me when all these hundreds and hundreds of high school kids don't have a home to go to at the Power 5 level because those jobs are being given to kids they're buying on the portal market. Don't cry to me when kids are getting screwed over, kids that are because you're the ones that wanted this. Well, I didn't think that. Yes, you did. If you didn't know this was going to happen, then you're just not real bright. I'm sorry. Right? So don't come to me about I'm very pro player.
I am too.
Very pro player. This is not right. These kids should not be having to go through this. They're being forced to make grown-ass decisions at 18, 19 years old with no guidance, with no protections in place for them, with no a way of saying, hey, do you know, Ryan, you know this, do you know how much work rookies have to go through to get ready to be rookies in the National Football League? The seminars and all the different things that they do. These kids are not being given this. No. They're not being given this. This isn't pro player. Right. Yeah. This isn't pro player. This is cowardice. This is we lost a lawsuit, so we're going to run with our tail between our legs and just let them do everything because we don't give a crap about these kids. That's what this is. This isn't pro player. What we're saying now is not pro player. More kids are going to get screwed by this system than are getting helped by this system. It's just like we see in a lot of things. The kids at the top, this is a great system for. Everybody else, effed. And that's what I hate about it.
That's not even counting the high school kids that are going to have less scholarship opportunities because of the trickle-down effect.
Way more kids are getting hurt by this than helped by this. And, Ryan, it was obvious. We talked about this. You and I talked about this. I talked about this on the show when they were talking about this crap. I said this system in the NIL is going to crush kids because more kids are going to get hurt. And yet all these national people that just refuse to either A, they were too stupid to realize it, or B, they didn't care because they cared more about they want to appear pro player. I don't want to appear pro player. I want to be pro player. And this is not pro player. This is not pro student athlete. It's not. This is pro business.
Yeah.
And it's still the same people that are making out on this the most. It's Bama just raiding other teams. You know, like Tulane invests all they've invested into building a Michael Pratt, and they're going to lose him. Why? Because he can go get some bigger NIL deal at a school that has how's that good for the game? How's that good for the game? So, whatever. That's my rant. Okay, let's get the last couple because I know you got to get out of here. BVG should be coach. See, I said it because I've been very hard on him lately. So I'm throwing him a little bone. He's been getting very salty and complaining. He says, all we do is talk bad about Drew Pine, which is verifiably false.
Clip it. BVG should be coach.
What up, IB Nation? Dude, after the rant I just went on, no, none of that from you. All right? Regardless of what happens with the bowl, I'm still very excited about Freeman. Keep up the great work. I think everybody should be. I think everybody should be happy about the direction that Marcus Freeman is going right now with the program. Now he's just got to take that next step.
I'm not one of the people that turned on him after 2 games, right? Like I've been on Marcus Freeman.
I was accused of that on Twitter the other day by some idiot.
Oh, really?
No, I'm not. You're the guy who turned on Marcus Freeman after Game 4. I'm like, hold on. You're saying I turned on him after the North Carolina game? Okay, that doesn't make sense. Like, what are you talking about here? There's some really silly people on Twitter, dude. I'm sorry.
There are.
All right. Anyway, next question.
And they all have fake names, so you don't know what they actually are. It's awful.
Ant VR question: is there a schedule for the show posted anywhere? Yeah, there is a schedule on the show. We're going to move our Monday show to 2 as they discussed yesterday. The only reason that today's show got moved to 2, we're going to keep this show at 1 o'clock. But sometimes there's business things I'm dealing with. I got a lot going on there. I'm home alone. My wife's out of town. Our dog that was sick, she threw up this morning, so I needed to monitor her and take care of her and do some things. So we just needed to push it back today. It'll normally be a 1 o'clock show, but that's why you need to hit the notification, because sometimes we may have to push it back just because things come up. An emergency comes up with his daughter. You know, the thing is, with Vince taking his new job, Vince isn't able to do shows during the day anymore. You know, so it's harder to call Vince up and say, hey, man, can you jump on real quick to help us out? He was able to do that on Sunday because he wasn't at school. So if one of us is some emergency comes up, we're just going to have to move it back a little bit. But otherwise, we will have the 1 o'clock show Tuesday to Friday. We'll have the 2 o'clock show on Monday. The reason we're doing that is we want to give Sean time to finish up his Lucky Lefty podcast and then kind of get that edited and up on CFB Nation before he has to do a show. Because what was happening was he'd have to wait till after this show to then go edit his podcast and get it up on the platform, which was hurting him. It didn't matter before because he didn't have a show to do. Once he was done with his show, he'd just come on ours, and it's all good because they didn't have a podcast. It was just their YouTube show. But now that we're putting that on CFB Nation, there's just a little bit more to it. So we felt it was fair to Sean to allow him to then prep for the show and be ready, not just scrambling from the end of his show to come on to ours. It wasn't really fair to him to do that and with all the work he had to do to get that done. So that's why we moved that. But the rest of our shows will be on 1 o'clock unless there's circumstances. Then, of course, we're going to have the 6 o'clock every Monday to Friday or Monday to Thursday, the IB Nation Sports Talk. And then they're going to kind of mess around with that little Friday special edition rapid fire, just kind of see how that goes. And we might continue that as well. Got a question here, Ryan, from Mailbag. If Ohio State gets smacked in the playoff and loses to Michigan next year, is Ohio State's dynasty done? I didn't know Ohio State was a dynasty. They've won one title in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
They've only played in the title game four times in that stretch, and they lost 3 of them because they played in 06 and 07.
Mm-hmm.
They played in the title game, the BCS title
Mm-hmm.
game, lost to Florida in 06,
Yeah.
and then lost to LSU the next year in the title game. Remember, LSU won the title in 07 as a 2-loss team. They beat Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl.
That was Matt
Beanie
Flynn.
Wells got hurt early in that game. No, it was what?
Was it Matt Flynn for LSU? Quarterback?
No, it was no, it was not. It was hold on a second. Let me look. Matt Flynn, I think, was the quarterback. Matt Mauck. It might have been Matt Flynn. I keep thinking Matt Mauck was the quarterback on the 2004 team. I get him confused. I think Matt Flynn might have been their 07 quarterback. Let's see here. Yes, Matt Flynn. Yeah, I always get Matt Flynn and Matt Falk confused. But they won. Jacob Hester was their running back. They had Trenton Holiday on that team. It was a good 2-loss national champion. So, yeah, that was an interesting year. Good old BCS.
That's when I didn't mind LSU.
Yeah, I did. I never liked Les Miles. I don't know what it was. Something about that dude.
He was quirky.
Bill Walsh said, did Alexander Ahrensberger get enough snaps this year? Well, based on his talent level and how the play was at other spots, I don't think he got enough this year. He certainly got less than he got last year. I don't quite understand why. I don't know if he's banged up or what, but I thought he should have played more. Of what we know, I think he should have played more.
I think I picked him as like kind of a X Factor reserve or something like that in the preseason. I'm pretty sure we did something like that where I was kind of excited about Alexander Ahrensberger a little bit because, like you said, he played a little bit last year. You saw some flashes. I mean, didn't he have a multi-sack game? Was it last year or something, if I remember correctly? And then, I mean, in the spring, Brian, like we saw him in person. I'm just like, dude looks like a dude, like that looks like a guy, and he moves well. And I thought he was going to have somewhat of a role on the defense this year. And for whatever reason, it didn't happen, to your point. But I would have liked to see him though, because he's a big, long kid who has some natural talent.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Get to our next question here. We have a super chat down here from Michael S. Are you advocating sacrificing winning for youth? We said very clearly, Michael, that that's not what we're doing. We answered that question at the time very directly, but thank you for your super chat, Michael. Nick Lane, how do you guys personally feel about Brandon Hillman tomorrow? Obviously, Brandon Hillman will be making his college decision tomorrow. Ryan, I believe that Brandon also tweeted out who his 5 finalists were. It was let me just find it real quick. I know that Notre Dame was one of them, but I just want to go through the entire list to properly prep Brandon's decision. But he is obviously from Portsmouth High School, Churchland High School. It is Notre Dame, USC, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, and Kentucky is Brandon Hillman's final 5.
And I don't know if,
at 1 p.m.
I was about to say, I got a text from his coach that it will be at 1 p.m. So
correct.
Just want to add that in if it was not in there.
Correct. But we'll find out tomorrow what his decision is, but we feel very good about things going into that decision, and we'll just leave it at there.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Perfect timing for a show as well. So.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, there you go. We have another super chat down here. We'll get to those here in a second. I wanted to bring this next one up from John A1. John said, is Burnham that much better at Viper than Aiden Gobira? Josh Burnham that much better at Viper than Aiden Gobira? Did he pass him up as soon as he was switched to linebacker? It's not so much that. They're just at different places in their development. It's Josh is a thicker kid already. He's put on weight a little sooner. Aiden's strong. He's twitchy, and he's long. But he's really skinny right now. Yeah. And the strength isn't quite where it needs to be yet. So is he past him for now? Sure. But Aiden Gobira is one of those kids that's going to kind of go like this in his career. Where, first couple years, he's got to get used to the weight room, and then bam, he's going to explode. Where Josh kind of showed up 235, twitchy, long, and in a little bit stouter package compared to Aiden. I mean, Josh is by no means short or not long. He's very long and not short. He's like 6'4", but Aiden's really tall and skinny. So for now, sure, he's passed him up. I think still, if Aiden has the growth spurt that I think he's capable of, there's no reason you can't use him at the other end spot as well. But yeah, thoughts on that, Ryan?
I would say, especially next year too, Brian, like playing both those guys potentially at Viper, they bring completely different dynamics to the table. Like you talk about the body profiles, But I mean, Joshua Burnham's used to playing a lot more in space, right? So like if you want to use your Viper more as like that true drop end type of thing to even work in coverage at times, you can do that with Burnham. But then Gobyra's more of that traditional edge rusher, right? He's had more reps, obviously, being a true pass rusher, outside track dude. So I think that it doesn't really matter, honestly, if somebody's passed one or the other up. It's the fact that I think that you need to use both those guys, and you can use them together, which would be really interesting to see because I think they both bring completely different dynamics to the table.
Next question from Dan V. Any word on how Peyton Bowen in-home visit went? Thanks for all the great content. I mean, typical in-home visit. Yeah, it went great. Loved it. Said all the right things and all that. The in-home visit that's going to matter is the Marcus Freeman one, which will come later. Yes. This was just Chris O'Leary. Notre Dame wisely has chosen to not use their big official visit now. Use it closer to signing day. It's smart. It's a smart thing to do.
Very smart. Very smart.
Yep, smart thing to do. But look, we continue to hear the same things we always hear. If we hear anything new, I promise you we'll tell you. And we're aware of all the stuff that's out there. Somebody's going to be really wrong and somebody's going to be really right about this one. And, we'll find out who that's going to be. But all we can do is report what he tells us and what his family says and what coaches say and all that kind of stuff. We're not going to get into the rumor mill stuff. It's just we'll find out in 15 days. Right.
If we are right, we're going to be very loud and annoying about it for a little bit.
Yes. There's no doubt. But let's see if we
myself.
are. Let's see if we are first. And it's not even about being right. It's just about we're reporting what he said, what's being told. Right. Sure. And if what we're told turns out to be what the reality is, then it's going to confirm for me what I think is going on.
Yes.
And I'm going to let everybody know what I think is going on. If he ends up flipping, which again, we're only saying this to make a hypothetical. Nothing has changed on our end. Nothing. But if he does end up flipping, then maybe there was some truth to the things people are saying. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't want to say what it would mean until it happens. And but yeah, we'll have a lot to say on signing day. There's no doubt about that.
Yep.
Ben Tarnowski says, is there any chance that we're going after Coach McCullough's son, the linebacker in the portal from Indiana? Now, Ben, if you were on the message board, my friend, you would have already known this. But yes, Notre Dame's going to pursue him. I don't feel great about their chances. I think there's just other places that I think he probably views as a little bit better fits. And the McCulloughs have been known to kind of go together to places. And, Dea right now, the youngest son, is committed to Cincinnati, and he's looking at Oklahoma. And Notre Dame and Ohio State are not recruiting the younger son. And so I wouldn't be shocked if they did that together. But I think he's also looking at Ohio State. I think Ohio State has been the leader for a while. He was committed to Ohio State for some time. Perhaps Notre Dame is able to get him. I just think as of right now, I don't see it going in that direction, in my opinion. All right, is Notre Dame turning into linebacker U then and pump block U? Pump block, I mean, again, I love the comedy of that, and it's a lighthearted comment. But look, the reality is to be linebacker U, it's not just about producing a great linebacker every couple years. It's about producing great linebacker cores with regularity. When Penn State was linebacker U, because they had a great linebacking core every year. Guy leaves, somebody else steps in, and he's a beast. That guy leaves, somebody else steps in, and he's a beast. You know what I mean? And that's just kind of, that's kind of where you want to be, right, as a program.
They went from Paul Plazluzny to Dan Connor to Sean Lee to Navarro Bowman. It was just
well, and then before that, it was LeVar Arrington. And then even before that, you go back in the 80s.
Matt Mellon,
Dude, they always had great linebackers, not just a guy.
Yes.
Like Notre Dame has Jalen Smith and then Joe Schmidt. And I mean no disrespect to Joe Schmidt, but it's different than when you're watching Ohio State and they've got Bobby Carpenter, James Laurinaitis, and Marcus Freeman or Anthony Schlegel. And you're like, dude, all these guys can play. Yep. Or what was the one team? It was because Freeman, it was I'm trying to remember the year that Marcus Freeman was led to Ohio State in tackles. Let me just go look at this real quick because I get confused on did Hawk come before or after?
I think Hawk was before. I think that was Laurinaitis and Carpenter.
Yeah. So you had the 2006 team. Your linebackers were your top two linebackers were Marcus Freeman and James Laurinaitis, right? And then was it 07? I think Freeman was the leading tackler on the 07 team. So then Laurinaitis, I believe. he wasn't second leading tackler. He was leader in solos. But you kind of go from those two dominate. Well, then what did you have the year before those two took over? It was A.J. Hawk, Anthony Schlegel, and Bobby Carpenter. They leave, and who steps in? Marcus Freeman and James Laurinaitis, right? And that's what LBU type thing needs to be. It's not just a great player. It's you got to produce great rooms consistently. And Notre Dame has produced a top linebacker as well, if not better than anybody the last decade. It's just not the whole group has not been as good.
It's still wild to me that they went from A.J. Hawk at middle linebacker to James Laurinaitis. That's just insane.
Well, he was actually their Will on that team. Schlegel was their Mike. Anthony Schlegel was the Air Force transfer, I believe, was the Mike on that team. And then Carpenter was kind of like that outside Sam, kind of would play on the edge and do some different things. But I believe that Schlegel was their Mike. I could be wrong on that, but I'll have to go back and look at that. But yeah, that was a really, really good group. But yes, and then you're correct. And so then what do they do after that? You know what I mean? They go to James Laurinaitis and Marcus Freeman, who was a top 100 recruit coming out of high school. So yeah, it was impressive to see what they were doing. But and like Miami was like that, right? Like it just every year they're not just producing a great linebacker; they've got 2 or 3 guys on every team, and that's what that to me is what the best teams do, Ryan. That's what I think the best teams do. So yeah, I'm watching this right now. It looks like from looking at it, Notre Dame is lined up in the field, and then Schlegel's playing Mike, and it looks like man, I remember how excited I was. First play of that game, Quinn goes deep and Samardzija can't haul it in. You're like, oh man, they're going deep on play 1. I miss those days. just took a bomb, and Samardzija just smoked the defense to get behind. So, but yeah, that was I was feeling good about that game early on, man. They moved the ball on them. But yeah, I'm looking here as well. Yeah, it looks like Schlegel was the Mike, and at least in this game, Hawk was the Will. So now again, a Will back then was a lot different than what a Will is now. You know what I mean? Like it was more of a true box guy. Yeah. But AJ Hawk was a monster in college. My gosh.
He's one of the best college linebackers I've ever seen. Him and Chad Greenway at Iowa.
Yeah. He was silly. He was a tackle machine. Now I'll say this: of all the great backers Ohio State produced in that time, with all due respect to James Laurinaitis and Bobby Carpenter and Marcus Freeman, all those guys, AJ Hawk was to me hands down their best. Hands down.
There's a reason he went
Andy
so high
Katzenmoyer. He was another guy that was a really good college player, not a real bright guy, but a really good college player.
He was man, he was something.
If you look up, this is going to sound really mean, and it probably shouldn't say that.
You're gonna say Meathead.
If you look up Meatwad in the dictionary, it's like a picture of Andy Katzenmoyer. It was not.
I'm sure Andy Katzenmoyer would probably.
Meathead's probably a better way of saying that. It's probably a better way of saying that. So. Yeah, I got a super chat down here from Ed3. Great show, guys. Thank you very much for the super chat and the kind words. Keep up the great work. Take a breath once in a while when ranting, Brian. LOL. Just kidding. I get fired up, And to Brian Hockney, Brian, I'm not upset with you. You're good, buddy. I love the question. Look, I get mad about it, but it's because I'm passionate about it, because I'm passioned about it. So, you guys get me you guys get me kind of fired up. I don't mind it. I enjoy because I'm passionate about it. And I want you all sometimes to be able to see into that passion. It doesn't mean I fake it or anything like that, but I'm pretty ticked off about this because look, it's like with anything. You look at history and you look at military, you look at any institution, you were all given like responsibility to be stewards of this great thing during our time. Right. And so you're elected president. Well, your responsibility is to be a steward of what I have believed was a great nation for a long time. And your job is to leave it better than you found it. Right. And to build on the legacy and not do things to hurt it. And the problem is, for years, you have people in charge that were they didn't really view it as, it wasn't about the game. This has been going on for a long time. And the stuff going on now is a byproduct of the way that they ran it for so many years that led to this, because I've never been a paying players guy. I'm still not a paying players guy. I don't think you should be paid for playing sports at the collegiate level. I believe that if you are someone who can make a profit off of your hard work and your name and your likeness, you should be allowed to do that. but I'm not a fan of paying players because I don't want to make them employees and then all that comes with it. It's not right for them. It's not good for them. It's not good for the game. But they ran it so far to the other extreme for so long that this was inevitable. And so my anger doesn't come now. My anger is that the decisions now, like what they were doing for so long, didn't hurt the game, it hurt players. What they're doing now not only hurts players, it hurts the game. And that's why I get really ticked off. And that's where I get frustrated by what I'm seeing. And so that's what I want to see fixed. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm fired up about it. School. All right. Let's see here. Let's get down to some more questions here. We've got Bet ND. Do you expect any commits to take in-home visits with other schools? Also, are there any coaches who need a good bowl prep and game to feel secure with their standing on the staff? Well, I think everybody should kind of look at the bowl prep as another opportunity to kind of go out and say, hey, we're gonna go out there and make sure that we're doing what we need to do to go out and win and make this coach feel that he should keep me around. I mean, I think everybody should kind of have that. I don't think anybody should take anything for granted right now. I mean, even Harry Heastan and how well I think he did. Look, there's also some games where his players didn't play well enough. I don't think anybody this year, except maybe Mike Mickens and Brian Mason, can look at the job they did and say, yeah, I'm good. I got this thing locked down. As far as any other players taking in-homes, I mean, Peyton Bowen's going to take in-homes. I would not be surprised if Jaden Lamar takes in-homes. There will probably be some kids that take in-homes over the next couple weeks. So brace yourself for that. I don't know of any outside of the Peyton Bowen who's kind of already done that. I don't know of any that will, but it wouldn't surprise me. I don't think it'll be a lot. And of course, I take that. You said other schools, so obviously we're not talking about in-homes with Notre Dame. They'll all have in-homes with Notre Dame. So yeah, that's there you go. So anyway, let's get to some more questions here. Last couple, we're going to wrap up here. Domer TX22, haven't seen you in a while, so glad to see you there. Are you more surprised that Riley or Barnes has not been able to see the field so far? More surprised by Barnes. I really thought that he would have a chance to get in the mix more, to be honest with you. I really did. So, yeah, I thought he would just be a kid that could really play for Notre Dame. Now, he's still a redshirt freshman, right? So it's not – I think the other thing, too, that hurt Ryan Barnes was Benjamin Morrison. I mean, as much as I loved Ryan Barnes, and I still think he's a heck of a player, I think he and others got beat out by a guy that was better and a guy that I graded out higher. I said during the last signing period that Benjamin Morrison was the best cornerback to sign with Notre Dame in a decade, right? Like, he was that good. I didn't think he'd be this good this fast, but I thought he'd be good. Like, I thought he'd eventually be an All-American caliber player. I just didn't think he'd be as a freshman, like maybe redshirt freshman, but not as a true freshman. I just, yeah, it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting. All right. Here's another question here from TJ Salika, who just signed up for the message boards. TJ, glad to have you on. Do you think Brian Mason takes an NFL job? I don't know. I know the Eagles will probably be in the mix for Sparker. I mean, we can speculate all we want about guys taking jobs. I mean, I have no idea. He has no NFL background as far as I know. So I couldn't tell you. I don't believe so. So yeah, I believe so. So there's some people saying that that Andre Carter, the DN from Western Michigan, was offered by Notre Dame. I was told that's not accurate. Whether that's going to change or not, I don't know. But I was told that that's not accurate. So I'll do some more digging into that. But I will. Yeah. As of right now, I don't believe that that's accurate. So I don't know who's reporting that. I just see people in the chat saying that. I don't know if the young man reported it or what's going on. I can't speak to that, but I do know that I was just told that that's not accurate. So we shall see. All right. So there's a lot of it. Look, y'all, this is why I try to tell y'all on the message board, stop just repeating every rumor you see. For example, There was a story put out yesterday or the day before by, I won't even say, but one of the big sites, like the big national people, and it was about a kid that is in the portal and how Notre Dame was going to be a school he was going to look at. So I reached out to my sources, and they're like, "I'm not recruiting that guy. Like, I haven't even looked at film of that guy yet." And so there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that going on. So that's what I tell you. I'll just pump the brakes. There's schools that are saying a kid's getting offered because they want to use that against them for another kid. Like, you're going to see a lot of this stuff go on. And so that's why I try to tell you. If Notre Dame's a player for a guy, I promise you we'll tell you. I promise you we'll tell you. And so, yeah, we'll tell you. I promise. Trucker Joe says Tayshawn Lyons says Notre Dame in his Final Four. I thought Irish moved on from him. They did. Just like when wasn't it Caden Proctor had Notre Dame in his Final Four? They weren't recruiting him. There's been about, off the top of my head, I can think of at least 6 or 7 kids this year that have had Notre Dame in their final list, and they're not being recruited by him. There's a defensive end from Utah who I love as a player, by the way, that released a top 10 like a month or so ago, and Notre Dame's not recruiting him. They would love to, but they're just not able to. So, yeah. So I don't yep. And that person's no longer with us. All right. As far as everything else, we're not gonna play the Peyton Bowen rumor mill for the next 2 weeks. We're just not. If there's something legitimate that we find out, I promise you, I'll let you know. I promise you, I'll let you know. So, and that's what I'm saying. Like, Notre Dame is not recruiting the entire Western Michigan team. They're recruiting one kid from Western Michigan that we know of. We're going to wrap up with this question. And it's good that Ryan got out of here because he has no interest in this. So USMA 87 says, history question. What was the root cause of World War II, European theater versus the Asian theater? So I'm going to give you what I know and what I believe to be true based on what I've studied, and very as brief as possible, because we could spend a long time on this. And there's obviously been books and shows and documentaries and all that stuff that go into this much deeper than what I could. Obviously, I was a history major. I'm not a historian. But to me, the root cause of World War II, you could go to a lot of European theater. You could go to a lot of different directions. I don't think there was a root cause, just like the root cause of World War I wasn't the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. That was just the justification that was used to go into World War I. But I think I also don't think it's as simple as saying it's the Treaty of Versailles and how harshly Germany was treated, and the financial, they basically destroyed the German economy, and the German people are very proud people, have been for centuries. And you knew eventually they were going to push back against that. And it opened up the environment for which a Nazi party could emerge. But it's not just that. I mean, I think that there were things that Joseph Stalin and the Russians did to prop up Adolf Hitler and his party, thinking that, we'll prop him up because he has similar ambitions that we have, and he can do some of our dirty work in some areas. Because people forget that the Soviet Union eventually became part of the Allies, but they were propping up Hitler. They signed a treaty with Hitler when things first got started, because they had no problem with him attacking Poland and killing Jews and things like that. And they had very similar goals. But it just was one of those things where what happened to Germany in World War I and how they were treated afterwards it just put all the right ingredients in place for what come about, where the people were more susceptible to that type of rhetoric. Hitler came, he said a lot of things that people wanted to hear, national pride and all these people are against us. And there was a country that was hurting and felt a lot of shame, and they gravitated to that, sadly. And then, of course, there was a lot of people that wanted power, and they were given positions where if you treat people harshly, and so there was a lot of the Gestapo attacks that silenced the people that were against it. It wasn't like 99.9% of Germans were completely on board with Nazis. That's not the case. It's just the people that weren't were killed off or silenced out of fear. And so, like, I've heard some stories. I took a class in seminary and had a chance to meet with some Messianic Jewish people, and they were talking about how one of the travesties of the German church, the Christian church, was, there were trains that would go through some of the churches where there'd be Jews on the trains being taken to concentration camps, screaming for help. And all they would do is just sing louder to drown them out, because they didn't want to hear it. People that would say, well, it's not going to happen to me, so I'm just going to sit here in silence. I mean, there's so many different things that went into that. But there was other parts of it too, was, just feeling like, like for the the Asian theater, for example, it wasn't that Japan necessarily had a problem with the United States per se. They didn't attack Pearl Harbor in an attempt to, we don't like you. I don't like anybody. But it was more about the United States was involved in actions with their allies that were cutting off their supply chain for oil. Japan is not a self-sufficient war nation. They can't have the Navy they had and the Army they had based on resources they get from their own country or China, who they had already attacked and sort of taken over. They needed to get down to Australia. They needed to get out of New Zealand and some of those areas and get to those trade routes to be able to get their resources. And the United States was heavily involved in stopping them, because the United States was a lot more involved in World War II than maybe some people realize. We just didn't have boots on the ground, but they were doing a lot to supply troops, and not troops, but like supply goods and services and oil and machines and weaponry to the allies and the supposed allies in that conflict. And so the attack on Pearl Harbor was meant to cripple the Western fleet to where the United States was no longer a fighting force in the Pacific, and they could no longer sort of be that blockade. And it left England all alone on because here's the thing. If they would have been successful at Pearl Harbor, England would have been all alone, basically, because Australia was not a strong enough fighting force without the United States to back England. But it would have basically been Russia was not getting involved. They had already fought a war with Japan, and China had been overrun. China was not the military power they are now. It was England was the lone nation fighting the Germans on the European front, because France had been conquered, and there was a couple countries that were trying, but they were basically all alone. And then they were also, the Navy was being spread out because they were the only ones that could really provide any kind of real force against the Japanese in Southeast Asia as well. And so if the United States were to get taken out, then it was literally Britain, this little tiny country that's like a size of a decent sized state in America, would have been all alone fighting wars on two different fronts by themselves. And so that was the goal. It was to take the United States Western fleet out of the competition, out of the fight before they could even really get involved, and take them out of being able to help with the supplies and the blockages and things like that. And then it was just Japan. It was Japan against Britain. And Britain did not have enough naval power in the Pacific fleet to stop Japan if it was just them. And that was the goal. And there was a lot of things that kind of went into it. The carriers weren't in Pearl Harbor when it happened. So the United States still had a carrier fleet that was strong enough to allow them to kind of push back a little bit. And then, of course, the intelligence, brilliance, and sometimes just the downright luck that led to the success of not just winning at Midway. It wasn't just that they holding off the Japanese at Midway would have been enough of a victory, because that was, kind of if they lost that one, they were going to be in trouble. They had lost a couple other battles. I think the Saratoga had been sunk by then. I think the Lexington had been sunk by then, and they were kind of running out of carriers. I mean, it was the Enterprise, it was the Hornet, and the Yorktown was really all that was left as far as the major fighting carriers. And if they'd have taken them out at Midway, it was going to be a problem. And people say, well, they would have invaded the West Coast. I don't know if Japan would have invaded the West Coast. That wasn't their point. They were just trying to take the United States out of the fight for what their goals were. I don't think there would have been this invasion and they'll stop them until they get to the Rockies. Maybe they didn't have the kind of manpower people think. Japan was much better defending their own nation against the United States than they would have been in an invasion against the United States. But anyway, the main goal was to take the United States out of the fight. And that was the big key. And so Midway not only stopped that push eastward from Japan, but the fact that it was such a route in the opposite direction. So not only did they stall Japan's momentum, but the fact that they just sunk all four carriers, and the Shikaki and what's the other one? It was the two that were involved in Pearl Harbor that weren't in that fight. They had already been, I think Leyte Gulf, I think is when they were kind of out of commission, being repaired. So you sank the Huryu. I'm trying to remember what were the 4 carriers that they sunk from in Battle of Midway. It was the Kaga, right? Let me see here. The Huryu was one. Let me just pull these up real quick because I want to get those right. So it was the Akagi, the Kaga, the Soryu, and the Huryu were the 4 that they sank. And then the Japanese thought they sank 2 carriers. So what happened is they hit and damaged the Yorktown during the Midway fight. And then when they tried to launch a counteroffensive after they had lost, like, I think 3 of their carriers, then they saw the Yorktown, the fire crew for the Yorktown put out that fire so quickly that when they saw Yorktown, they thought it was a different carrier and they attacked it again instead of going after the Enterprise or the Hornet. And so just a lot of things like that kind of went into how that battle was won, because the United States was outmanned. I mean, it was 3 carriers against 4. Their Zeros were much better fighters than the American planes at the time. Now, the American pilots were top notch, but that was also before Japanese lost all their top pilots. So they still had a lot of their top pilots there, and they had better planes at the time. So there's just so much that went into it that makes it just fascinating. I think that's why that theater's always been more fascinating to me. Honestly, it's just because of a lot of that stuff. So anyway, that's kind of how I read it. So was my thoughts on it. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. So I don't know. I enjoyed that. So all right, that's it for today, everybody. So we're gonna move on from this and get back to work. So there's some news to break, of course, and yeah, so Solomon Davis decommitted from Arizona. That's a young man. If you didn't know, we had some intel on him on the board the other day about Notre Dame and his interest in Notre Dame. So you want to check that out as well. So hope everybody enjoyed the football show. If you just joined now, we're talking World War II. That was the very last question. We had a lot of football beforehand, but we had some fun with that. And I'm sure there's a lot I'm leaving out and things like that because, again, I was a history major. I'm not a historian, but it is a fascinating period of time. And I always enjoy studying that. And my grandfather fought and was given, I think, 3 Bronze Stars. I'd have to pull up his record. But that was one of the things I got when he passed away was I got his service record, which is really cool to see. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge and very, very proud of him. He never liked to talk about it. But anyway, hit that like button, everybody. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Sign up for the message boards. We're going to have a ton more intel on there. And we'll give you real intel, not this person said this, so we run with it and act like we have it too. None of that stuff. We'll try to parse through all the BS, and there's a lot out there to try to give you guys as best we can just where things actually are and without all the clickbait and all the other nonsense. So you're definitely going to sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Definitely check that out. If you're a member of the message board, we have a new Christmas code, so you get 25% off your entire purchase to the merch store. If you are just a regular listener to the show or whatever, you can email me at brian@irishbreakdown.com, and I'll gladly give you that. You don't have to be a premium member. If you are a regular watcher, regular listener, you can get access to our 25% off merch store because IB family is more than just the people that pay to be on the message board. We know that some of you are not in a position to do that. And so we understand that, but you're all part of the IB family, IB community. So just don't necessarily want to give that out over the air. If you just email me at brian@irishbreakdown.com or brian@driscollpublishing.com, they both work. I will send you the promo code for our Christmas special, which runs through December 31st. So 25% off your entire merch store purchase. I added a couple new items, a bucket hat, an IB bucket hat, which I like. And then the pullover, there's a white one, a blue one, and I think a gray one. It's an Adidas pullover with the IB logo on it. So it's a very cool item. It's just pricey, but very cool item. So Vince was wearing one the other day. I have a navy blue one as well. So it's pretty comfortable, very comfortable. So anyway, check those out as well. So like, subscribe, notification bell, sign up for the message boards. And of course, join us again on the Irish Breakdown podcast.